morning. The May 1st Senate Finance Committee hearing will come to order. We are going to have 3 bills on the agenda today, the first of which is the Supplemental Finance Bill, House File 2433. And after that, we are going to finish up with Senator Hoffman's Senate File 4476, the Omnibus Human Services Bill. And then after that, we are going to take up Senator Wiklund's Senate File 3298, the Health Professional Scope and Licensing Bill. And before I move to the table, wanted to say that the A26DE amendment, which should be in your packets, contains the language of all the articles of House File 2433, and amendments to those have been adopted by this committee during the last 10 days or so. And Ms. Stengel will briefly walk through which articles came from where. And because we've already walked through the spreadsheets and fiscal notes for each of the component articles, we're not planning to walk through them again. If there's a request for members to walk through any particular articles, we can gladly do so. And with that, I'm going to turn the chair over to Senator Pappas and present the bill.
Senator Marty, House File 2433, the Supplemental Finance Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. This is the bill that we've seen in the last 10 days, various parts of it. And today they're put together, and we will go through them after Ms. Stengel says which articles are what and where they came from. Then we will take amendments. I will encourage members to have amendments in order of the articles, just so we have it easier for nonpartisan staff to show up here and be present for those amendments. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm ready if she can.
Do you, are we going through it, or are you moving the A26?
Oh, I will move the A26 amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the A26 amendment to put the bill in the order that this committee has already adopted, article by article.
Members, should we take that vote, and then we'll have the staff walk through it? All in favor of the delete all A26 amendments, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. And then we're turning it over to Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A brief overview of the contents of the bill. The amendment is the 826-0165 amendment, and it has 19 articles. As Senator Marty indicated, this comprises the work of all of the things that we have been amending into the supplemental budget vehicle. To be very brief, Article 1 is the education article. This is from Senate File 3551, Senator Kunesh. Article 2 are the higher ed provisions from Senate File 3973, Senator Fateh. Articles 3, 4, and 5 are the agriculture articles. These are from Senate File 5073, Senator Putnam's bill. Articles 6 and 7 are the environment provisions. These are from Senate File 4214 from Senator Herr. Articles 8 and 9 are the energy provisions from Senate File 4504, Senator Frentz. Article 10 are the jobs and economic development provisions from Senator Champion's Senate File 3664. Articles 11 and 12 are the labor provisions from Senator McEwen's 2373. Articles 13 through 16 are the state gov provisions. These are from Senate File 4059 from Senator Zhang. Article 17 is the Medicaid fraud provision. This is from Senator Johnson Stewart's Senate File 2689. Article 18 is the campaign finance article from Senator Port's 4196. And finally, Article 19 are clemency provisions. This is from the original language of Senate File 3432 before that bill was additionally amended.
Senator Marty, any comments, or should I
Yes.
ask for amendments?
Madam Chair, I have one, maybe a couple of them for the education articles, and I will start offering one, and the first one is the A73 amendment, which I believe is in the packets, and this is one that, Madam Chair, you and Senator Kunish point out was in the Omnibus Education Finance Bill that came to the committee. It was not included in here. This is simply for school district fund transfers for Ivanhoe, Maple Lake, Moorhead, and West St. Paul. And this is something routinely done. We have Senator Kunish here and others who could speak to it if anybody wants, but I think this is routinely done, and it came to this committee. It just did not get put in this bill earlier, so asking for you to do so.
Senator Marty moves the A73 amendment. Are there any questions on the amendment? Would anyone like to hear from myself or Senator Kunish?
Madam Chair,
Senator Pratt.
I would, because I'm still trying to find the amendment.
It should be in your packet, Senator Pratt.
Oh, lots of things should be in my
Oh,
packet.
right, I know. There's lots of things in the packet. Senator Kunish, do you want to come to the table and just talk about the transfers? And then Senator Pratt can ask his question.
I don't know if I have a question yet.
Okay, you may not have a question. Well, that's fine. She can just talk about them briefly. Senator Kunish.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee's members. These are 4 different fund transfers that have been requested by these schools, anywhere from $68,000 to $4.5 million. These, there's an explanation of them in, if you'd like, I can go through each one, but we vetted these requests. We had hearings on these requests. The districts have reached out to us considerably. You know, this day and age when things are tough and tight in education, sometimes if we can find that ability to create some flexibility of fund transfers, I'd like to be able to do that for those school districts. And so, as I said, these were fully vetted and approved.
Thank you, Senator Kunish. Any questions from the committee? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Kunish, I used to sit on a school board, but it's been a while since I've been through school finance. So the Early Childhood Family Education Reserve Balance, if I remember right, that's a special levy specifically for early childhood by the school districts. Do you know why we need to, and taxpayers are paying that for a specific reason. Mm-hmm. Why are we agreeing to that transfer?
So in this instance, the enrollment of the early childhood program has dropped considerably. They've kept it open, they've kept it available, but because of the population, that fund has that $68,000 balance, and they would like to then use that to support their pre-K program. So it would go into the pre-K program.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And have they said that they intend to lower the levy on the early childhood then, so that we're not collecting funds in excess of enrollment?
Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe there was discussion on that, but I don't know what the final plan is going to be.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then on the 1.8 million for Maple Lake, so that was money that was levied in a bond referendum, most likely for construction. Am I correct on that?
Senator Kunish.
Yes, Senator. Senator Pratt, yes.
Senator Pratt, I might add in my notes, because I was originally going to offer this amendment, the Maple Lake School Board has held 3 public meetings to discuss the option, and their voter-approved HVAC project was completed under budget, so they would like to transfer that to operating capital in the general fund.
Madam Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I'm more concerned about the ability to take, if these were actually bonded funds, what's the ability then, and maybe nonpartisan counsel can help me out with this, what's the ability to move bonded funds for a specific purpose to general operating funds? Is there any concern with that?
Mr. Nauman.
Mr. Chair, I know Mr. Arneson's in the room. I'll do my best, and if I get this wrong, he can jump in. Is your question, what is the legal authority to move this? Because that's what's being contemplated here with this proposed amendment, is to permit that. Typically, school districts ask the voters for authority to raise those funds. They go into a specific account, and then there they stay to pay the liabilities until such time as either the liability is satisfied, or in this case, there's some extra, and the legislature presumably is being asked to make that transfer.
And Senator Pratt, they have to be approved, obviously, by a affirmative vote of the local school board. But to me, if they find contractors that are very efficient and quick and they come in under budget, that's a good thing. But then there's also the issue with schools are always hurting for cash. And to be able to transfer any leftover money into their operating budget or another budget to help with those expenses, I think makes sense.
Madam Chair,
Senator Pratt.
that does make sense, except for the fact that these monies were raised specifically for capital expenditures, and typically in a bond referendum, you would say that you could use, you'd use them for the HVAC or other capital needs. What I'm concerned about is that we are allowing a school district then to transfer funds from a bond referendum, borrowing for a specific purpose to cover operating cost needs. And whether or not that's a fully appropriate use of that, I mean, I get it. We passed a number of new mandates on schools that have hurt their budgets, and they're all struggling with cash. In fact, my own school district is looking at cutting $4 million from the budget. They just can't keep up with paid family medical leave, earned sick and safe time. All the other mandates that we put on schools have not allowed them to meet their operating needs, and now we're taking bond funds that I'm presuming they have some sort of, I mean, they would have to be able to say to me that they have no deferred maintenance on any of their buildings that they're then going to go out and ask voters for. I'm wondering if this should be a voter-approved change versus a school board change, or if they could use this money to help their deferred maintenance costs and then turn around and use money that, let's say cash flow that they would have used for addressing those deferred maintenance issues over to the general operating fund. It looks like Mr. Arneson has
Joined you.
Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair and members, it's my understanding that of the fund transfers authorized under the amendment, the ones that authorize a transfer from the building construction fund to some other fund or account, that the proceeds, the excess proceeds available in the building construction fund are proceeds originating through the long-term facility maintenance program. So these would be amounts originally raised for LTFM authorized kind of big projects, HVAC, health and safety projects. As Senator Pappas indicated, it's my understanding that in these cases the projects were completed and required less expenditure than originally anticipated. And so, for example, the transfer authorized in subdivision 4, the $4.5 million available from the building construction fund would, if this transfer were not authorized, that $4.5 million would continue to be available from the building construction fund for other LTFM authorized purposes. If the authority proposed in the A73 were enacted, the district could transfer up to that amount from the building construction fund for the operating capital account and use it for purposes authorized under the operating capital authorized uses.
But Mr. Arneson, they wouldn't have to. They could still use it for any kind of building maintenance if they desired.
Madam Chair and members, yes, I think they could use it for building maintenance in any case. members probably are aware that the LTFM authorized uses include, kind of a wide range of deferred maintenance activities. I think the proceeds available here from the Building Construction Fund were proceeds raised under a sort of additional authority under the LTFM statutes that authorizes additional LTFM levy revenues from for HVAC projects or high-cost health and safety projects, things like this. So it's my understanding from conversations with the agency that if the money remained in the Building Construction Fund, the district could use the money for kind of similar HVAC, health and safety authorized projects. If the money were authorized for transfer to the operating capital fund, the list of operating capital authorized uses is a kind of a long list. It includes both capital and certain operating expenditures for capital projects.
Members, in case you're wondering what LTFM means for us non-education people, long-term facilities maintenance or management maintenance.
Maintenance.
Okay, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Madam Chair, I don't want to step on the toes too much of the Maple Lake School Board. As a former board member, I have a lot of respect for the authority that they have, but we have authorized these funds and this levy for a specific purpose, as Mr. Ernest said, and there's a broad ability to use those funds in many different ways. I can tell you from my days on the school board that as these buildings get older, there's never a shortage of deferred maintenance projects that need to be done. And to have 1.8 million sitting there that then could be used for, truly operating expenses, I think is a concern, especially when we're saying they won't have to make a reduction in their levy, which was why I guess I originally thought it was some sort of bonding referendum versus say their LTFM.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Arneson.
kind of responding more directly to Senator Pratt's question. Under current law, ordinarily, if there are excess proceeds in the Building Construction Fund and the district does not find an authorized use for those amounts, after some period of time, the amounts left in the Building Construction Fund under statutory requirements are transferred to the debt service fund, and that has the effect of reducing future property tax levies for the district. So it's through that mechanism, and I think this is your question, through that mechanism, the excess funds, to the extent they're not used by the district, would be returned to the taxpayer in the form of kind of future reductions in the property tax levy.
Senator Pratt, in these situations, there have been discussions with the public and with the school board members who are local elected officials. And my opinion is that we should respect the decisions of school board members, as you were a previous school board member. If they feel like there's a higher need at this moment for operating and that they have their maintenance issues under control, then I think we should give them that authority.
Madam Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I tend to agree with you, with the exception that these were levied for a specific purpose, that they can be used for other capital needs, and we're allowing them to go into general operating expense. And they have authority then to go out and ask their taxpayers for that additional operating expense. But the fact that we are transferring these funds and making no reduction to the levy, not giving the taxpayers any, I mean, they could run this thing the same way. They could either put it back into the debt service fund and reduce the property tax and then ask voters for an operating levy increase that would then keep those property taxes flat. I'm just letting you know that I have significant concerns on that one. Then the Moorhead Public, Madam Chair, the Moorhead Public School, is that coming? That's coming from the community ed levy that they've raised over 80,000 more that they want to move over to their operating fund.
I can answer that, or Senator Kunish?
Go ahead.
My notes tell me that the district continues to see fluctuation in its enrollment and affected the use of these funds, so they don't need them. It's a small amount, $80,000, so it would just be transferred to the general fund.
Madam Chair,
Senator Pratt.
is there any indication that Moorhead's going to reduce their levy as long as their enrollment's down?
My notes indicate there's been a fluctuation, so it goes up, it goes down, so reducing the levy probably could create a problem where they wouldn't have enough money then in 1 year.
And then, Madam Chair, I have the same concern with West St. Paul Mendota Heights. Being able to move those funds, $4.5 million this time, from the building construction fund to the general fund, and making sure that, you know, it seems to me that we would have a problem with, again, voters have paid and constituents have paid these funds in. Again, I'm presuming these are bond funds that have been sold that would go back to the debt service account. And it becomes kind of a one-time infusion with a long-term requirement, right? Generally 15, 20 years on a bond. Is that about right, Mr. Arneson?
Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, members, Senator Pratt, I think your observation about the kind of mechanics of, you know, transferring that $4.5 billion back to the debt service fund are accurate.
Senator Pratt, sometimes the superintendent is here, but I don't see him right now. But it's a very large school, so it seems like a large amount, but I think their project was also a very large amount. Any Senator, can I move to Senator Johnson, Senator Pratt?
Yeah.
All right, Senator Johnson. Oh, you're all good? Okay. Oh, good morning. Any other questions, any other comments from the members? Then all in favor of the A73 amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
No.
Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted.
Madam
Senator Marty.
I have one more amendment to the education articles. It's the A88 amendment, which I'm not sure is in the packets, in which case, while it's being distributed, I will speak briefly to it. This is a temporary guidance to Department of Education on how to deal with the literacy aid, and I'll turn it over to Senator Kunish, who can explain it better. This was something that came up very recently that the department needed some guidance on this.
Senator Kunish, do you want to begin as the amendment's being passed out?
Sure. So this amendment addresses literacy incentive aid, which is calculated by the growth and proficiency of 3rd and 4th grade MCA scores. Since the MCA changed following the passage of the READ Act, it's unclear how the Department of Education will calculate and distribute that aid that's generated by a growth factor. The A88 takes action to the 3-year adjustment that excluded the 2019 and 20 assessment from the aid calculation. And then this amendment directs the department to exclude the test scores from 2025 and 26 from the proficiency and growth percentage, and then ensure that the statewide aid amount is not less than the estimated amount for fiscal years 27, 28, and 29. And so without this, the districts would see a really major swing in their literacy incentive amounts. I think there's a few things that you need to know, that this is a cost-neutral action. The literacy aid changes were included in the 2025 Senate Education Finance Bill. We did hold a hearing this year, and the proposal will then ensure that literacy aid is going to the students who need those additional supports rather than students who are excelling at literacy. And it's important to know that due to the number of students who will be opting out of MCAs this year, from what we've heard, there could be sort of record numbers that will be opting out of the MCAs this year due to Operation Metro Surge. And we want to make sure that those opt-outs that are usually scored as a 0 would not be counted into this, so that those, especially in our larger districts, that those calculations then would not be skewed, and that the districts would get that literacy aid amount that would be more clear for them and more timely for them.
Are there any questions on the A88 amendment? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is part of this because there's a new MCA and there's no real comparison?
Senator Kunish.
That is part of it, but we are also concerned about that effect of students opting out of this test. And then there was a third thing that went right out of my head. Say your question again.
Well, what I'm
Pratt.
wondering is why we're making this change. You talked about the impact of Metro Surge and being able to take, of students to be able to take test scores, but as I understand it, MCA reading and math were supposed to be administered between March 3rd and May 2nd, and science between March 3rd and May 9th, which is after Metro Surge. Isn't the real issue that we've got a new MCA test?
Senator Kunish.
I wouldn't say that. No, I don't think that was the issue specifically. It's more about the opting out of the tests, and we want to make sure that schools don't see a huge deduction in their literacy aid for the students that need it the most.
Just to know,
Senator Pratt.
Madam Chair, that the MCAs are being administered after the end of Metro Surge, so I don't see how that becomes a major part of the issue as much as just we've seen continual growth in the number of students that are opting out of MCAs. And just sorry, we're trying to politicize it like that.
Yeah.
Senator Kunish.
So we have seen over the years a growing number of people that, parents that recognize the social emotional effects of some of these high stakes testing. And especially after Metro Surge, when so many students didn't go to school, education was interrupted, whether they opted to go online or in person. Sort of the psyche of students in a lot of our districts has been affected by Metro Surge, and there is a strong consideration or concern by parents that they didn't want to put their kids through another stressful situation. And I was the testing coordinator in my school for about 12 years, and it is an extremely stressful time. And when you add what is going on outside of the classroom to the expectation of scoring well on a test where you've either missed lessons, they just aren't connecting with you for whatever reason. And so, that is part of the reason. And so we also want to make sure that we can actually calculate the growth factor. And if we have a bunch of zeros in there, meaning students haven't taken that test, that's not showing any growth at all. And we'd rather not factor that into it. We'd like to see the actual growth.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I've got a note here from somebody in the schools, and let's just depoliticize it. There's a new MCA that won't have a comparison to calculate growth. I think this is a good amendment. I just want to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons and not trying to blame everything with Metro Surge, just like we tried to blame every student falling behind on COVID for a while. At some point in time, we need to work on getting our students back up to speed.
Yep.
And there were a number of online options for students that weren't attending school in person. So hopefully education was minimally interrupted. But let's just talk about it for what it is. We got a new MCA test. We can't calculate the growth between the two, and we need to make this change. And I say we just take the politics out of it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Pratt, I do have a note that Mr. Uni from MDA is online, if you care to have him comment. No. All right. If he wants to, I guess. Well, we don't need to take testimony, it's just really if you'd like it. Okay, you're okay, all right. Then, Senator, I think we're ready to vote. Then Senator Marty moves the A88 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Aye. Motion prevails. Oh, we caught your eye.
Madam Chair, I don't have any more education amendments. I'm not sure if other members of the committee might.
Are there any other amendments on the education article from members of the committee? Seeing none, we move on then to the higher education section.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Senator, yes. In the higher education one, I received an amendment that came from Office of Higher Education, I believe, but, oh no, it was revised or flagged, a technical amendment, and have Erica Bird, you guys can explain this, I think.
Is that the A82 amendment?
Right, and I think that's in the package.
It should be in the packets, right. Okay, and we have before us, sorry, Mr. Hunter. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I may defer to my colleague who has some additional information, but just as a brief overview, Senator Marty is correct. When the higher education article was initially added into the supplemental bill, there was a reference to a statutory citation that didn't make sense because it didn't exist yet. And there were some additional pieces that were originally in the higher ed policy bill that didn't make it in. This has to do with collecting enrollment data, which is also connected to some fees that the Office of Higher Education charges, which is why all these provisions are before the committee in the first place. So Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can also have my colleague fill in anything from a fiscal perspective that I might have not covered there.
And this is Miss, I'm looking for her name. This is Miss Bird. Thank you. Would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to note that Article 3 of the House File 2433 deals with licensing and registration that litigation response that resulted in some special revenue. So this does not add any additional revenue or expenditures. It just cleans up the statutory reference technical issue that was identified by the revisor. So it pulls in sections that have to do with including audited information on a certain schedule and other technical elements like that. Happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Senator Naumann?
Madam Chair and members, I was just going to offer to you on the spreadsheet, this is lines 18 and 24, so the money is already tracked. So this is just bringing all the policy in to connect with the prior decisions that were made by the committee.
Are there any questions on the A82 amendment? Then Senator Marty moves, yes. Senator Pratt.
So it looks like, so I guess I was trying to do a couple of things at once here. So can we talk about what it means to submit to the office on the same schedule stated in 136A? Are we providing data, student data then to some new entity?
Ms. Bird.
Madam Chair, Senator, this is information that already goes to the Office of Higher Education. My understanding is this just clarifies the process for submitting that application in terms of timeline and the audited financial statements, what they need to include specifically to the Office of Higher Education.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments from the committee? Then Senator Marty moves the A82 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. That's the higher ed article. Next, we have the agriculture article. And are there any amendments in the agriculture article?
I don't have any of those or any others in higher ed. If other members of the committee might, I don't know.
Do members have any amendments on the agriculture article? Okay, seeing no comments, we'll then turn to the environment and natural resources article.
And Madam Chair, I have an A77 amendment, which should be in the packets. And this is an amendment that came, as you recall, when Commissioner Strumman spoke. She was concerned that we were not covering the law enforcement costs that DNR agents had to fill in earlier this year. And we talked with the Commissioner and Senator Herr and felt it was appropriate that they had some carry forward money in various budgets, but they can't transfer them between divisions. And this amendment would simply allow them to transfer up to the 1.6 million that would cover those deficiencies, to cover the additional costs that the DNR law enforcement officers had, could cover them this one time. They could transfer them between divisions up to this purpose, but they have to report to the legislative chairs on how much is used and which funds it came from. And Mr. Mueller can explain this further, and I believe Bob Meyer is here from DNR if anybody has questions.
And are there any questions from members of the committee? Mr. Mueller.
Madam Chair and members, just to add to this, these would just be transfers from appropriations that originally were fiscal year 24 or 25 and were already general fund appropriations and are non-grant appropriations. So these were just operating appropriations that went to other parts of the other divisions of the DNR. And like I said, are left over from fiscal year 24 and 25 that were carried forward into fiscal year 26. There's probably, depending on when the count is, there's about $15 million of various carry forward, general fund carry forwards within the DNR, and this would allow them to tap those carry forwards and transfer up to 1.6 million of it to the Division of Enforcement.
And Madam Chair,
Senator Marty.
I believe the DNR feels this can address the shortage, and Senator Herr concurs with it as well.
Are there any questions from members of the committee about the A77 amendment? Okay. All right, then all those in favor of the A77 amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
And Madam Chair, I know you have one in just a minute to add to this one, but I would like to take up A58 amendment, which I believe is in the packets. And this is a provision, the DNR lands bill apparently came into some controversy on some nature or another. It had 30 or 40 provisions, and we were expecting to take that bill up separately, but only one of the provisions is, according to DNR and local governments, an urgency. And this is one that was going to transfer some land or sell some land from the state park in Mille Lacs County to tribal government next to it. This follows up on something that was done, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, because the Mille Lacs band needed cemetery space, and the county supports this, and the DNR supports this, and this would transfer land from the state park out of it, and then would allow the private sale of that surplus land to the county. And as far as my understanding, and we have Mr. Meyer here if anybody has questions, but that this is supported by the county board, by the tribe, and by the DNR. But this was considered urgent because the cemetery space they've had is run out, and the state and the county and everybody thinks it's a good transfer.
I did forget to mention that we do have Senator Herr online if there's any questions from him. And do members have any questions for Mr. Meyer from the DNR? No questions? No comments? All right. Senator Marty moves the A58 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
And Madam Chair, since you are chairing right now, I will offer for you the A57 amendment, which I believe is also in the packets.
Thank you, Senator Marty. The members, the A57 amendment just cleans up the language a little bit on the infectious waste changes that we agreed to, which is just the study. So there's no audit or penalties, as was in the original bill. The first change is just a small tweak of changing the due date. You know how bad it is to have due dates January 1st, and then staff is working over the holidays. We move that to January 15th. And then the second change is to have just a survey of generators, the survey of generators to just be a sample of them, which can be used to give a summary of current practices. The MPCA cannot do a survey of known generators since they don't have a list of them. Nothing in law requires them to report to the MPCA, and it would be a lot of work to generate the list, produce the list of generators and then follow up to get the responses. So they believe that by using a sample, they'll get to the intent of comments made last week about understanding what the generators are currently doing on the issue. That was Senator Wiklund's request. The third change is about the estimated cost for various parties related to recommendations in the report. And the MPCA doesn't have information on what it costs for a generator to respond to an unannounced inspection or other policy changes that are suggested. So they're just narrowing the language so that would normally have been worked out in rulemaking. And so they're just having to narrow the language. So there'll just be a summary of materials that they can easily collect. So it will not be an exhaustive review due to time constraints. And so that's the A57 amendment. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so just a quick question. Have we defined what a representative sample is?
You pass that down. I forgot to note that this is the dump yesterday of infectious waste. No, I think we only have 3 copies, right?
And I think,
Pass this down. No, we only have these 3 copies.
Madam Chair, Senator Pratt, I believe the PCA felt that this was a better way to, they don't know, I mean, we don't know how you get a representative sample, we don't know, but anybody they can find out, they want to make sure if it's hospitals versus clinics versus other things, they want to make sure they hear from as many folks as they can, but it's kind of hard to survey everybody when you don't know what the universe is, so they're trying to get this is designed to say that you're supposed to not just do just big hospitals or just something or another, but try and get all sources together.
Mr. Kukulka is making his way to the table to respond to that question, Senator Pratt. Just please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Kirk Adelka. I'm Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. As the author mentioned, we are looking to be able to get a subsample of various pieces. We would work with the medical industry to find out where are those types of locations. I know there's been a lot of conversations about hospitals and surgical centers, but there are other generators also of medical infectious waste, and so we would work with others to see where are some of those, do some outreach to them, collect some information on them. As mentioned, we don't have a list of all known generators, so can't cover all the examples, but it was our understanding, hearing a testimony last time, that the committee would like some more information on what's being done as they consider things next year, and this would help accomplish that.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm not exactly sure what that means by if that answers my question on a representative sample, and will you be taking that at the waste generators? Will you be taking it at the waste facility? Where are you looking to do that representative sample?
Mr. Kukulka.
Madam Chair and committee members, this is a sample of the practices they're doing at their facilities. So this would be a narrative. This would be us talking to, for instance, a collection of hospitals or surgical centers to get a rough idea of how they handle their infectious waste inside their facilities. This would not be samples, for instance, of us taking samples of various types of infectious waste. Because generators can carry this out in multiple different ways, what we're going to do is try to get a summary of how they generally take care of this, but each facility may set up different handling procedures.
Mr. Kukulka, maybe Senator Pratt wants to know how are you going to choose which generators will be in your sample?
Madam Chair and committee members, we would work with some of those we've talked to already, the hospital associations, surgical centers, but we'd also look into talking with the Department of Health to see what other are potential generators of the infectious waste, to see what other categories make sense.
Okay. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Kukelka. So will this be a statewide audit, or is this just specifically for those that generate waste to Newport?
Mr. Kukelka.
Madam Chair and committee members, we would want to get information on what's being done overall for the legislature to look at how there may be any differences in different regions of the state and their practices.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So understanding this is going to be an operational audit versus, say, actually what was generated and stored away, I guess. Madam Chair, I know this is something that you've been working on. And I don't know, we haven't heard from the hospital. I haven't heard from the hospitals yet on this language yet, but can we be, if we've come to kind of this agreement, can we agree that there'll be no floor amendments then attacking this, this provision?
Senator Pratt, if we adopt this provision, I don't intend to do any floor amendments. And my understanding, I hope I'm correct, is the Hospital Association, they wanted the survey language. We're just doing the survey language.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And any other comments, questions from members of the committee? Then Senator Marty moves the A57 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Madam Chair, I do not have any more amendments for environment, energy, renewable development, finance. I don't have any amendments.
Is there, any members have any other environmental? Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. I just have the A94 amendment.
Is that in our packet or needs to be passed out?
Yeah, I think it needs to be passed out. So, Madam Chair, it's a pretty straightforward amendment.
Why don't you proceed then to explain it?
It's all right. So the A94 amendment is kind of a continuation of the work that started last year. It first started Environment Committee. We had some work done in transportation. Now it's coming back again this year based on a bill that was moving from the House. This is dealing with ATV weight requirements and fees. So this is a bill that raises the dry weight of a vehicle from 2,000 pounds to 3,500 pounds, which is comparable, it's still in the lower end to most of the states surrounding Minnesota, but it raises it up to that 3,500 pound mark. This was established back when those machines were just a motor with a steering wheel on it. Now they've got so much more that are part of that machine that the weight limits have moved up. ATV USA has been supportive of this in the past, and then also they have recommended here out of state. I think it's only for the out of state application fee for this is going from $30 up to $50. This has been one of those bills that has been pretty important to my district in particular. I've got both Polaris and Articat building these machines in my district, but it also goes well across the state. A lot of folks in both the metro and the rural own these machines, and it's hard to even sell them in the state of Minnesota anymore because the weight restriction on it is so low. So that's the amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. If Mr. Myers in the audience, maybe you'd like to come forward and comment on section 1 or online. Oh, he's here. Great. Mr. Meyer, welcome to the Finance Committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. For the record, Bob Meyer, Assistant Commissioner, Department of Natural Resources. To the amendment, this is an issue we've been discussing for quite some time, and I will just say for the record, these machines are currently in operation in our system right now. It does need to be updated. Other states are updating these. In my career, these have systematically been done as technology advances. A lot of these machines are overweight because of batteries, looking at new technology to make them more environmentally friendly. The department's concern is not the weight of these machines for the most part, it's the width, and there is an agreement to keep them at about 60 inches for the trail uses. Additionally, you see most of these machines being used on forest roads, not so much the technical trails that people are looking for on a straddle ATV machine, but they're driving down forest roads, minimum maintenance roads, and most counties in the state allow those machines to be used on those roadways. So it is aligning the weights with what's currently in play in the industry. And I will also say I've been receiving a lot of calls from dealers throughout the state about concern about clarifying the statute. So,
Mr. Meyer, do you feel like the trails and the bridges are ready for the additional weight? It's going to be more maintenance issues on our trails and bridges?
Madam Chair, members, we have conducted a complete inventory of our trail system, and they are capable of doing this. As I said, the width is more of a concern to us than the weight. If you look at the pressure per square inch of the tires, the trails are able to sustain these weights.
Maybe it would help, though, in the bonding bill if we did put more money into trail maintenance. Senator Johnson, I think that would be a good idea.
You always have an angle, don't you? That's good.
Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I have deep concerns about the amendment, and I see Senator Herr has his hand up as well. I don't have problems with it being used on certain forest roads and so on. I have trouble with the fact that a lot of our ATVs are used on trails that, I mean, I've seen enough of the damage to wetlands and everything else from this. I have very great concern about making this type of a change here. As Mr. Meyer indicated, this has been discussed for several years, and the reason it doesn't just flip right through, as it sounds like right here, is there's controversy over it. Now, defer to Senator Herr to comment more if he has any comments.
Senator Herr, online.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Marty. This has been heard in my community in the past and has brought up controversial, and the situation is still not resolved. My concern is very much the same, like what Senator Marty has stated, and I think we need more conversation going forward. And it's not for this year; it could be for next year. Thank you.
And then let's hear from Senator Johnson. Did you want to respond at all yet, or I was going to go to section 2?
Yeah, let's talk about this while we can. I mean, I think the less controversial fee part is the fee aspect of it. But we've heard from both ATVAM, which deals with the volunteers, do a lot of the maintenance of the trails, do a lot of the bridge building, put in the effort behind it, and their organization is very supportive of doing that because, quite frankly, most of their machines are in this class and are starting to be not allowed on the trails because the weight limit restrictions are on there, and they're butting up against that. They can't get the proper licensure for it. So we know that they're in support of this. We also know that the DNR has confirmed that the trails are at a standard that can handle these machines as well, too. So although I understand Senator Herr, Chair Herr's issues with it and Chair Marty's issues with it, those cases where individuals are going off the trails into wetland areas that's trespassing, that isn't allowed within the law, so they're breaking the law to begin with. I don't know if a weight limit bill is going to affect whether people go on or off the trail, but the trails that we're trying to get these machines to ride on and license them for, it's very important, and the infrastructure is there ready to go, but now we are punishing an entire industry because of a couple of bad actors, and we've seen that over and over again, trying to target this industry. And I think when you look at the tourism dollars that this brings into the state, when you talk about the manufacturing dollars, when you talk about the economic impact of this, it really is such a benefit to this state and the people that live here and people that like to come and visit and bring their machines. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that, ride with the organization as they have their annual rides, but it's really something that's special to the state of Minnesota, and this is a simple move forward. I think we have everything in place for it. So I'm not sure what the constant fight about this simple change is, but again, this is something that I think needs to move forward, and this is a great year to get it done. So.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Johnson touched on one of the issues I was going to say is that I don't, to Senator Marty's concern, the weight doesn't change that. I'm really interested in what Mr. Meyer had to say in that. The technology, the batteries, that are causing this weight increase. And we met with, I've met with some CEOs here in the state of Minnesota who have their headquarters here. And as a former jobs chair, we learned how important that headquarters economy is to this state. As Senator Johnson said, we've got the manufacturers here, and they can't even run their new models on our and demonstrate them in our own state. And my fear is if we continue to take these people for granted, they're going to leave the state and they're going to take those jobs with them. So I don't see this just as a tourism type of amendment, Madam Chair, but I see this as preserving our headquarters economy, our economic, our growth engines. Because, Polaris and Arctic Cat are very much synonymous with the state of Minnesota and are known worldwide for their products. People are looking at this state specifically in part because of what these companies can do, and increasing it won't change if someone's going to trespass. Changing the weight's not going to change if somebody's going to trespass, but it is going to make these machines more efficient, more better performance, maybe even more environmentally sustainable. Let's support our headquarters economy. Let's support our Minnesota employees that work at these factories. So, Madam Chair, I hope this at least this provision of the amendment will go on.
This is a good discussion, but I do have to comment that Section 1 does appear to me to be a policy issue, not a finance issue.
And Madam Chair, I request we divide the amendment between sections 1 and 2.
Okay. And Senator Frantz online wanted to comment. Oh, is he there? Oh. Senator Frantz, are you with us? Okay, the amendment has been divided. Since we still may have a comment from Senator Frantz, why don't we discuss Part 2, Section 2, and I'll go to Mr. Mueller.
Madam Chair and members, Part 2 of the amendment increases the fee. This is just the non-resident trail pass. And according to a different fiscal note I had on a different bill, the DNR only sells about 2,400 of these non-resident trail passes per year. So this would increase the total revenue going into the ATV account by just like $48,000 per year.
Is there any, hold on a minute, Senator Frantz, we're on Section 2 right now, then we'll go to you. Is there any discussion on Section 2 of the amendment? Senator,
Madam
yes,
Chair.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you very much. Well, if we're not going to do Section 1, it's difficult to anticipate doing Section 2 on this one, simply because, Section 1 would raise the weight limit so that, that's a more inclusive sort of, getting people onto the trail. We'll get more people out there visiting our state. But if we're raising the fee on this one, but everybody else is able to have these newer four-wheelers with the more environmentally friendly aspects on it that might add some more weight, I don't know why this would, I don't know if this would be the right time to do this. Maybe they'd have to be in conjunction with each other.
All right, then we'll go to Senator Frantz online.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, members. I would like to put in the perspective of the Senate Energy, Utilities, Environment, and Climate Chair. The reason many of these are at the extra weight is because they are electric. We're watching dealers now talk to potential buyers in Minnesota of purchasing electric vehicles for the trail use who are saying there is a question about the weight. Not exactly the way to help sell more electric ATVs. I had supported this amendment on the floor after consultation with Senator Dibble, who I believe is also asking, aren't we working against our electrification goals? I'm one who believes we have to make reasonable, tough choices on climate change, and I think this weight increase would normally earn my vote. Senator Marty, you know I like to defer to the chief author, so I will hold that vote for now, and I respect what Senator Johnson is saying, which is that the fee part doesn't really fit if we're not going to do the weight change. My last question, Madam Chair, would be, I'm a little unclear if the DNR does or does not support the amendment. And I think it's reasonable for us to ask agencies, if the trails can support this additional weight, does the DNR have a position? If Mr. Meyer is able to share that, that's fine. Again, members, I supported this basic weight change before. I will not support it today in the amendment if that's the position of the chief author, but we're cutting against our clean energy goals to make it harder for people to buy electric ATVs and enjoy them. Thank you.
Mr. Meyer, I got the impression that you did support it, but maybe you should clarify that for Senator Friends and the committee.
Madam Chair, members, again, Bob Meyer, Department of Natural Resources, and thank you for the opportunity. We do recognize the controversy that surrounds this issue, but as I said, the system can maintain these weights, and also these vehicles in some cases are already owned by Minnesotans and are on our trail system right now. So it would clarify that issue that we have. Our officers don't drive around with weight or scales to weigh machines in the middle of the trail system for the most part. But so we would support it. We do recognize the confusion or the concern around it as well.
Okay. Senator Murphy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate every member's ability to bring an amendment to committee. And of course, we should entertain it. I do recall with great memory the controversy that ensued after we added such an amendment like this on the floor. And an idea that has a controversy often, from my perspective, means there has to be more conversation among people. And I worry, well, I shouldn't say I worry. If those conversations haven't happened and if we haven't addressed the various perspectives from the Environment Committee, the Energy Committee, and from members' perspective on this issue when we think about economic impact and people's love of the outdoors. If we haven't reconciled those issues, then I don't think we should add this to a finance bill. Not at this point. It was very controversial last session. We all know that. And I think because of that, we could try and push this into the bill, but it won't have resolved the conflict. And I think for a policy like this to actually work, we have to resolve the conflict, and that's part of the job of the legislature. So I will not vote for this because I think it is important for us to do that work first, while I appreciate the interest on the part of the author in bringing it. Thank you.
Senator Johnson, there will be an environmental policy bill on the floor of the Senate. Maybe that's a more appropriate place for you to offer your amendment. And then I wanted to hear, are you ready to respond? Oh, I think we have Senator Jasinski online. Oh. I apologize. No. I don't want to skip over him. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for being late, and I missed the introduction of the amendment, but I stand in support of it. This is something we've been talking about for a while. Minnesota needs to remain competitive with our neighboring states. The industry of four-wheeling has changed from a smaller vehicle to larger ones, side-by-side, four-passenger, where people can go out and enjoy it. As Senator French said, for the electrification of these in the future, and the future of our companies here in Minnesota are located that are producing these, have a huge impact on Minnesota. And I'm supportive of this because this will really help Minnesota remain competitive with our neighboring states, empower our businesses to help with delivering vehicles that will do that. And again, looking at electrification is very important. I think from what I've heard, and I know Assistant Commissioner Meyer is there, the DNR supports this. So I think it has the support. I think we should put it on, take the amendment, and move forward. So thank you.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, it's easy to add the, Section 1 to the Environment Bill, but I think what Senator Johnson has indicated, and rightfully so, is that this really shouldn't be a divided amendment. That the only reason to increase the fee is to accommodate the higher weights. And the only way we can do that under the omnibus bill rules is to do that here in committee, because we can't add a new fee, we can't add a new financial impact on the floor, and I see Mr. Nauman scowling, so maybe I'm mistaken. Mr. Nauman, am I mistaken?
Mr. Nauman.
Mr. Chair, I think the way to think about Rule 7.4, I think is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Is if you were making the fund worse off, then I think you would have a challenge. Challenge is probably not the right word to use. The body or the president may choose to rule an amendment that made the fund worse off out of order. In this case, I think the ATV account and the fund in which it resides would be improved by a higher fee. And so I think we should think about that one before we make a snap judgment on it.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But Mr. Nauman, we also can't add a new revenue source that's not already in the bill, and this would create that scenario.
Mr. Nauman.
Mr. Chair and Madam Chair and Senator Pratt, yes, I was not thinking about that particular rule. So yeah, that's a.
I don't understand why it's a new revenue source when it's already an existing fee. So it's not like a new source. The source is already there.
Madam Chair and Senator Pratt, we're crawling into interpretations that are best left for the president, but I think what I will say is that I think what Senator Pratt is saying is if the fee itself is not listed in the base bill itself, then it would be bringing a new revenue source into the bill.
I see.
And then you might run afoul of that particular rule.
Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, again, if they want the fee or don't want the fee, that's fine. The problem I have is with the policy part of the first part. The reason what sounds to this committee and some of the comments are that this is everybody should be doing this. Is great for industry, it's great for the environment, great for everything. And the reason it hasn't passed is because there's huge controversy over it, and I think the environmental groups are very concerned about damage to trails, and the idea that we would put a new fee in here to help cover more damage to trails for machines that don't cause more damage to trails is part of the argument. And so I guess I basically think this is an issue that deserves discussion in the Environment Committee, not in Finance Bill. And I stress, I think that this would make the bill, be a risk to the bill, I think some, and I just don't think it's a help to the bill right now. And I'd urge the proponents of this amendment to talk with the Environment Committee and have hearings there.
And final comments, and Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I'd like maybe to flesh out that controversy a little bit more. I keep hearing about this said controversy. Yeah, we know that the trails are capable of taking these new machines, these higher weight machines. But the argument that I hear now is simply that, there's going to be damage to it, even though we know that the trails can handle it. So where is the controversy? I don't see that. I see maybe a false idea that this is going to ruin the environment and we're going to have issues with it. But what we're trying to do here is get newer, better machines on the trails so people can enjoy it in a way that is more environmentally friendly and better for the state. It's good all around. And yet we still keep hearing this idea that there's some controversy around it. I wish people would come out and just say that they're anti-ATV. They don't want to see that for some reason, as opposed to saying that there's controversy and we're going to hide around those things. This is so straightforward. I don't know what state in the nation right now has a lower limit than Minnesota, and we are the source of these machines for the country. I think we should be making sure that we are taking care of our state, is not just trying to send our machines out to other places as well. And it is incredibly disappointing to hear the rhetoric this morning. Maybe we got to have another year of this, but I think this year is a good year to get this done. I know it's policy in here, but we just did the A57 amendment, which is policy. We've done some other policy here today as well too. I think this would fit just nicely right into that bill today. So. Madam Chair, thank you for entertaining the A94.
Madam Chair, I would like it divided. I'm not sure which. The author gets to choose.
I think we still have a comment from Senator Friends online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can still hear me. just want to add, again, I will support you, Senator Marty, as the chief author and show respect. I am not persuaded that there's a need for further conversation because that suggests there's information that all the parties don't have. And I would just call members' attention to the fact that we have constantly needed to balance environmental concerns with economic development, with the enjoyment of our citizens of our state. In my opinion, we should be looking at this weight change and making it. But I would add this, and I think this is important for all of us. This amendment has the support of the Department of Natural Resources. There are environmental questions when amendments do not have that support, but I hope in the same way, Senator Marty, that I support you as the chief author, and I will vote no on this amendment today, that we ask ourselves, if this is proper environmental policy for the state of Minnesota, why does it lack the support of the Department of Natural Resources? Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I request a roll call on this vote.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, first of all, I mean, if somebody's saying we don't have all the discussion here and what new information, I'd like to go back to the fact that I think north of Highway 2 we have, I'm not sure what it's called, limited or managed, but where south of there you can ride on marked posted trails, north of there you can ride on trails. And if I am riding off trail on one of these big machines, I'm breaking the law. I do that one time through there. You go the next day and there's a trail here and you're not breaking the law. So one lawbreaker creates a new trail with bigger and bigger and heavier machines. There are all kinds of issues like this that I think deserve full discussion, not the size of the machine and whether this is okay on this kind of trail and so on. I think it's not appropriate for this bill, and I strongly urge you to reject it. And again, I asked for a division. I'm not sure which part the author wants to take first.
I would like to wrap up this discussion, but Senator Jasinski does want to add one more comment. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, dividing this makes no sense because one is related to the other one. And just one last comment about the bad use or whatever you think is against them. You know, I have a single passenger ATV, it's a four-wheeler, and I'm one person on that. The way the technology is now they have side-by-sides and quads, so they're 4 passengers. So there are still obviously a lot of combustible engines out there, but we're going towards the electrification, which is great, if that's what wants to be done. But just remember, if I'm going with a group of four-wheelers that each have to ride their own machines, and let's say it's 4 of us, then all 4 of us are going to be riding a separate machine. So that's 4 combustible engines. Now, if you're transferring the new technology to a side-by-side, a 4-passenger, you're eliminating the emissions because it's less engines. So it really does do a positive effects, you know, whether the electrification is here or not. Just think about that. You're reducing the amount of engines out there because you're putting more people in each machine, and that's the way the future is going. This is what's happening. So that's just my last comment. If you want to think about, you know, what's good or bad, but I think this again is crazy that Minnesota cannot adapt to what the technology is doing. So thank you.
I just want to say that that I too am possibly persuaded on this section 1, but that out of respect for the Environmental Committee Chair and the author today, I'm going to vote no, but I think this is worth having a discussion. And Senator Johnson, Senator Stump once invited me up, me and Senator Poggemiller, and we did ATVing, whatever you call it, and it was quite exciting. I can see why people enjoy it.
Well, you're welcome back up again, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So, anytime.
I was much younger then. All right. That last comment was not in the microphone. So,
which half are we voting on
yes,
first?
Senator Johnson, which
If we could vote on the first
Section 1.
section, and then if that fails, then
You'll
maybe we'll withdraw the amendment.
withdraw the amendment, okay. All those, a roll call has been requested on section 1 of the I can't read the amendment.
94.
Oh, there it is. The A94 amendment, I need glasses. The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Marty.
No.
Senator Friends.
No.
Senator Pratt.
Yes.
Senator Champion.
No.
Senator Draheim.
Yes.
Senator Howe.
Aye.
Senator Jasinski.
Aye.
Senator Johnson.
Aye.
Senator Mohammed.
No.
Senator Murphy,
No.
Senator Pappas,
No.
Senator Wiklund.
There being 5 in favor and 7 opposed, the motion fails. The amendment is not adopted. And Senator Johnson, then, you're going to withdraw the A94? All right. Senator Johnson withdraws the A94 amendment till a later date. So that is the environment section. Are there any other amendments on the environment section? Then seeing none, battery stewardship, any amendments on that section from any members? None? Yes, Senator Pratt.
I thought Senator Jazinski had an amendment on Article 6 as well.
Oh, Senator Jazinski. Senator Jazinski, did you have an amendment on Article 6, the environment and natural resources?
Actually, I thought I was going to do the A94, so I apologize. I didn't have my stuff here. I just got in quickly, so let me check.
Madam Chair, I'll offer the A56 amendment.
Do we have that in our packet?
It should be, yes, ma'am.
No, we don't. The A56 amendment will need to be
Oh,
passed
maybe it was
off.
just given to me. Senator Jazinski, this is the wetland amendment.
I don't have it in front of me.
Senator Pratt or Senator Jazinski, do you want to explain the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll paraphrase for Senator Jazinski while he's getting the amendment delivered to him. But currently, when we're doing road projects, we require wetland replacement to be a 2-to-1 replacement. And in many cases, those wetlands that we're replacing with are not really good wetlands, and it increases the cost of our transportation projects. We're already facing increased cost to transportation with the greenhouse gas emissions requirements that were passed, and we just believe that it would be more economical and, quite honestly, just as environmentally friendly to reduce the wetland restoration from 2-to-1 on road projects to in public right of way to 1-to-1.
And Senator Jazinski, did you want to add anything before I call on Senator Marty?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Marty, and thank you, Senator Pratt. I did not have it in front of me, but yes, Senator Pratt said it very well what the amendment is about and what we're trying to do here. Obviously, roads are getting more and more expensive. We have a lot of wetlands here. We've replaced them 2-to-1 for many years, and most of these wetlands that we have to create are along highways that are just not as nice as having wetlands where they belong. So I support the amendment, and I think it would be a great amendment to add.
Thank you, Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I'm recalling seeing this amendment the other day. I can't remember if it was in the transportation bill or where, but wetlands policy has been long debated, and making a change like this in this budget bill, I think, is inappropriate, and I'm not sure. Senator Herr has his hand up again, and I would encourage you to call on him.
Senator Herr.
Members and Madam Chair, I don't know if the language, I don't have the language right here with me, but there was a prior attempt to make amendment when in finance last time. So this is the second time that the same amendments coming to the finance committee. The original bill itself has never been heard in our environment committee, and so it still remains a controversial subject. But again, it never been heard, and then this is not the first time the amendment has been attempt to put into this bill. This is the second time, and so last time we already voted down. Thank you.
And Madam Chair,
Senator Marty.
My recollection was wrong. It's not a transportation bill, but when we had Senator Herr's environment bill to put in here, this amendment was offered and voted down, yes.
Yes, Senator Pratt, just remember the environment bill, policy bill will be on the floor, and this amendment could be offered then. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Just let's, let's remember that this is a omnibus bill with many, many different agencies all put together. I've disagreed with the direction that the majority is going, but as Senator Johnson mentioned earlier, we've done plenty of policy changes in this bill already, even yet today. And this does have a real cost impact to our transportation projects, as Senator Jasinski said. When we put together these large omnibus bills that cover many different subjects, it's hard to say that something like this is inappropriate. And just because it failed on one bill that went out to the floor doesn't mean that we shouldn't reconsider it maybe in a different, more appropriate bill like this. I just don't see how anything could be inappropriate when you've got almost every agency in the state covered by a single bill. So let's do what's right for Minnesotans. Let's create good wetlands. Let's keep our road projects, the cost increase of those road projects under control. And I think this is just a good common sense amendment.
One thing about being the chair is you get to comment on everything.
Yep.
Which was really kind of fun. Senator Pratt, I think the attempt here is, as you know, is to do a strictly finance bill. And Senator Johnson, that 857 amendment, there was money for that study in the bill, so that was inappropriate when you're modifying the language that accompanies money. But there's really no money, no concrete money, and there's no budget item, there's nothing on the spreadsheet related to this. So I think in keeping with the idea of trying to keep a clean policy bill, finance bill, which many members have urged over the years, so we don't have these humongous finance and policy things. This is kind of thick enough, I think, this bill, without adding more or any policy language. Senator Marty.
Madam Chair and Senator Pratt, just to be clear, I didn't say you shouldn't offer this amendment. I'm just saying we already voted on this, I think, as the amendment was being put into this bill. And so I think we voted on it related to House File 2433 the other day. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's slightly different, but my objection to it is the policy of it and the fact that I think this is very controversial. I think the wetlands policy has been debated in this legislature for 40, 50 years. And we have, 10% of post-settlement wetlands left. I think that this was a long, hard-fought compromise many times over the years, and I just oppose the amendment, and I think that it's not a good step forward, and this committee's already rejected it. So I didn't say they couldn't offer it, I just urged us to do what we did the other day and reject it again.
If we could take Senator Howe online before we go back to you, Senator Pratt. Okay, Senator Pratt.
We've talked about how we've rejected this amendment. Senator Howe offered it and withdrew it. We never voted on this amendment. We never rejected it. So let's get the record straight.
Madam Chair, I'll correct myself now. I remember seeing the amendment. I thought we rejected it. We have not rejected it. I'll urge us to reject it now and ask for roll call on it.
Online, Senator Howe.
Yes, I will say that it probably is all policy, and maybe we should we'll withdraw it again, but I will say that it's a bipartisan bill. It's going to save all branches of government all the way down from the state, the local, the counties, and it'll save money. And I'm a little disappointed because Senator Hur, you gave me some, the Chair Hur gave me some guidelines on what I needed to do to get the bill heard, and then he still refused to give me a hearing, which really disappointed me that we couldn't get a hearing after we did everything the Chair asked me to do. So it's disappointing that we didn't get a good debate on the bill. And so with that, we will probably see the bill again, the amendment again on the floor, and thank you.
It's probably me. Senator, this bill was offered by Senator Pratt. Senator Pratt, do you want to proceed with a vote on the bill? Senator Howe is suggesting to you to withdraw it.
Madam Chair, as long as we all remember that I withdrew this amendment, I'm happy to do so.
All right. The A56 amendment is withdrawn. I've been asked to remind people to turn off your mics when not speaking. We're getting feedback, and I think it may be me that has my mic on. Okay, we're looking for more amendments. Any more environment amendments from members? Please speak up. Battery stewardship, any amendments? Energy finance, any amendments in this section? Renewable development finance, any amendments there? Now we're on to Article 10, Jobs and Economic Development. I have a note that there is the A72, Senator Champion. Is that your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I offer the A72 amendment. Just for clarity, the A72 amendment, it removes a provision that is currently in the bill, which is Senator Paz's bill for $100,000 to ignite. One of the reasons why we are deleting the bill is because we always make sure that organizations provide 990s, other financial information, and we have not unfortunately received that information. So as a result of that, we have decided to remove it from our bill. So that would be removal of or deleting $100,000 appropriation from the job bill for the Ignite Business Women organization. Just for clarity, this is Senator Paz's bill. We have talked to Senator Paz, and she's aware, and she's on the same page with us that we need to take the appropriation out of the bill. So this amendment takes care of that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any discussion on the A72 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the A72 amendment say aye.
Aye.
A motion.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. Forget to pause for the people online. Let's see, where are we? Then that's any other amendments for the Article 10, Jobs and Economic Development Appropriations. Then we're on to Article 11, Labor Appropriations, and any amendments on labor? All right, seeing none, we're moving on to Article 13, State Government Appropriations. And there is that in our packet? Senator Murphy, do you have an amendment? I'm told there's an A90. Senator Marty, would you like, I'm sorry, Senator Murphy, would you like to explain the A90 amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and I am grateful to get this in writing. Our colleague, Senator Gustafson, has been working on a prevailing wage portal proposal that was heard in this committee, I believe, last week. There were questions that were raised in the committee, and the work to get this set right is not yet complete. And I want to give a lot of credit here to Senator Gustafson and the advocates who have been working for this, especially those in the building trades. And I also want to give a lot of credit to Senator Champion and his team for digging in and working closely with Senator Gustafson and others to find a path. I know Senator Frentz also had raised some concerns. And at this point, because those concerns haven't yet been completely resolved, I think it is right to take it out of this bill at this point. And if that work as it continues is fruitful, then we can reconsider it. So that is my motion, Madam Chair, on the A90 amendment and the rationale for it.
Is there any discussion on the A90 amendment?
Mr. Nauman may also have a comment. For
Mr. Nauman?
Madam Chair, Senator Murphy, I think given that you have a written amendment, the conversation we were having is unnecessary.
Thank you, Mr. Nauman. And I just want to be clear that I'm doing this with Senator Gustafson's knowledge and okay.
All right, any discussion on the A90 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Are there any other amendments on Article 13, the state government section of the bill?
Madam Chair.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have the A86 amendment.
And the A86 amendment will be passed out. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the previous year, we've had a lot of losses within our body and tragedies across, politics here in Minnesota in particular. One of those losses that we had was our esteemed peer and colleague, Bruce Anderson, who had served this country for 30 years in multiple capacities, Air Force, Army, and here at the Minnesota Senate for many, many years. He passed this past year, and what this amendment, the A86, is doing would be renaming the Veterans Service Building to the Bruce Anderson Veterans Service Building in honor of the memory of Bruce Anderson and his service to this state and to this country. The cost of this is covered by the administration. We have a note that is roughly about $6,000 worth of cost to change the signage for the building and other places. So it's not an overly burdensome cost to the administration to do this, but I think it would be a good gesture towards Bruce's memory and his family that we do that.
Are there any comments on the A86 amendment? Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I think highly of our former colleague and so on. I wonder, has this bill been heard or introduced in state and local or any committee like that?
Senator Johnson?
Madam Chair, I'm not aware, I do not sit on that committee itself, so I don't believe it has. I think it was something that, our group of people around this Capitol building thought of, but I'm not sure if it was heard in the building.
Mr. Erickson?
Madam Chair and members, I don't believe this was a bill that was introduced, but it is parallel to bills that the committee has heard previously.
Madam Chair.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first I've seen of this, and I've sent a note to our chair out of consideration, but I also appreciate and recognize the years of service of our former colleague, Senator Anderson, and think this is a rightful memorialization of him in a year when we are grieving so many losses. So I just want to let you know that I support this.
Madam
Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I, again, as I said, I have high respect for our former colleague. I can think of many of our former colleagues who I have highly respect and may be appropriate to name buildings after them. I just like it to go through committee process, but vote as you wish.
And do we need any comments from fiscal? Mr. Nauman, do you have any comments?
Madam Chair and members, it's my reading of Section 4 that there would be no trackable cost. It's been identified as $6,000, and that's what the fiscal note says. That would be a cost that would be absorbed by the agency.
All right, any further discussion? Senator Pratt.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank Sarah Murphy for her support on this amendment. You know, as she said, we've lost a number of notable colleagues over the last couple of years, and as we look to remember them, I can't think of a better way to honor the memory of Senator Anderson, a Vietnam veteran who dedicated his life to two branches of our military and then in his service to the state, both in the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate. This was the passion of Senator Anderson. He was a staunch defender and advocate for those who served our country, those who put their lives on the line, and even those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I hope we were able to pass this unanimously.
Senator Anderson was also former chair of the Veterans Committee and was a big advocate of veterans courts. Right. Any other conversation, discussions? All those in favor of the A86 amendment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Any other amendments under the Article 13, state government? Okay. Any amendments under Article 14, the Board of Barber Examiners? Article 15, the Board of Cosmetologist Examiners. Speak up. Article 16, state government miscellaneous. Article 17, Medicaid fraud. Any amendments? Article 18, campaign finance. No amendments. Article 19, clemency provisions. No amendments. All right, we have a generic amendment, the A74. Are you offering that, Senator Marty?
Yes, Madam Chair.
It's in our packets.
A74, which I believe is in the packets. This is a bill that Senator Rest carried, Senator Rest carried last year, and taking half of the money that comes out of Attorney General's enforcement actions when it's not dedicated to a certain, if it's a consumer enforcement thing and they're victims of that, they can collect from that. If there's one where a settlement is going to the state of Minnesota because the state as a whole was harmed or whatever, those funds are dedicated. But in other ones, the money until last year went into the state general fund, and Senator Rest and AARP and some others were pushing to create a consumer enforcement section. I was co-author of that, supported it and so on. And it said half of the money up to the first $5 million collected each year would be deposited in the account. At that time, we asked the Attorney General's office and those involved to come up with a way of, you can see on line 27, if the Attorney General projects insufficient funding, may recommend to the legislature prescribe a formula for prorating or capping payments. And in effect, Senator Rest's legislation, which was included in the Commerce Committee language that came to this committee, they came up with a formula. It begins on line 32 of the first page, that it would be unpaid consumer enforcement compensation could receive up to $50,000, and then half of the next money up to the next $100,000. So they could receive up to $100,000 in a settlement with this. So that was their way of dealing with the proration or dealing with an inadequate amount. Senator Rest's bill also would have removed the cap on enforcement actions, and it's hard to fiscal note something when you don't know. Some years there's no money coming into the fund, some years there's more than that. This year there's apparently would be more than that coming into the fund, and so we did not take it last time with a no cap on it, but we thought a $10 million cap was reasonable. I've had discussions with this with Senator Rest and Chair Klein about this. I think this is reasonable, and again, the people who have benefited from this fund I think this is helpful. Again, there are certain times when the Attorney General can have many tens and hundreds of millions of dollar settlements. Most cases, those are dedicated to the settlement is going to a certain group of people or a certain entity that was harmed by the action. But in the cases where it's left over, we think it's appropriate to, again, the program's not even a year old, but raising it to 10 million instead of 5 million, I think is appropriate. But I'd ask the committee for support for the A74 amendment.
Is there any discussion on the A74 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The A74 amendment is adopted.
And Madam Chair, I had one other one I have, others may have others, and it was related to Office of Justice programs, and the House actually put some.
Senator Marty, do we have the number for that amendment so we can pass it out?
Stengel, would you know, it was to transfer $1 million to the
A96 amendment.
A96
The
amendment.
staff has that amendment. Please pass it out. Senator Marty on the A96 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The other body, their Public Safety Committee, successfully appropriated, it's not, I think it's on Ways and Means, or maybe it's on the floor, appropriated $12 million to the crime victims accounts under Office of Justice Programs to address a $12 million cancellation. The federal government cut back on these. There's strong bipartisan support for the Office of Justice Programs, and the crime victims account includes many things, such as for victims of domestic violence and the domestic violence programs. They are already been hard pressed. This $1 million is not going to address that. This is meant to sort of as a placeholder to tell the House we're open to considering, if they're passing that appropriation, that this is something to be on the table in both houses. And so I'm asking members of the committee to consider this. Senator Umu Verbatim has been strongly urging us to do this because I think she recognizes the importance of this. And again, I think it's had strong bipartisan support in Judiciary Committee over the years. Just was not money for it, but when the House came in with it, we're going to try and put up $1 million to make it clear we're interested in this. With that, I ask for your consideration of the A96.
Any discussion on the A96 amendment? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Marty, you mentioned a federal funding cut. Can you maybe elaborate on that, which cut that was?
Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I believe that we received a letter, the committee received a letter from one of the domestic violence programs. No, I've seen one that was sent, maybe came to me or somebody, but it was talking about 12 million. I think it was a canceled grant when the federal government was canceling lots of grants that people were relying on at the time, especially several months ago, grants that I think University of Minnesota researchers were just all of a sudden, the money was promised you is not coming through. And I think that's what the situation with this was. And I could ask Senator Umu Verbatim if she's in the building, if she could come. But that's where it was. It was canceled grants, I believe. And I believe the total was 12 million. And I believe the House is filling in for that.
Senator Marty and Senator Pratt, we heard a lot about this in the Judiciary Committee, and there was a lot of concern about this victims fund.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I support the victims' accounts, and if we're trying to work with the House on it, I certainly understand. I guess I get, a little frustrated that we seem to want to politicize everything and make it about federal cuts. And, if they're true, we'll take them. But It seems like I'm not going to oppose the amendment, I'm just saying it's just a lot of hearsay.
Madam Chair.
Senator Murphy.
Madam Chair, I am happy to get the articles that support the argument that Senator Marty is making, but I do recall this was one of the very earliest tranches of cuts coming from the Trump administration a year ago. And I remember it so clearly because it was a strike. It was such a strike to the heart of important work in protecting victims of domestic violence, and it was so shocking. And after, you know, the year, 2 years almost that we have experienced now of sort of brutalizing cuts to state and community budgets, nonprofit budgets, it doesn't strike in the same way, but this one I recall very clearly because it was early and clear and harmful. So I am really grateful, Senator Marty, that you're bringing this forward. I mean, I don't mean to politicize at all, but just stating what actually transpired in the early tenure of this administration.
We could all blame Elon Musk. Any other discussion on the A96 amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. The A96 amendment is adopted. I'm sorry, there was one nay that came after I said it adopted.
Marty, two.
I think that, are there any other amendments? Members
Madam
of the committee, Senator
Chair, I
Pratt.
do not have any more of my own, and I
Senator Marty.
don't know if others do.
Senator Pratt.
I'd like to introduce the A87 amendment on behalf of Senator Howe.
A87 amendment needs to be passed out.
And Madam Chair, while this is getting
Senator
passed
Pratt.
out, and to help Senator Howe know what we're going to talk about, this is a State Patrol study that he's been advocating for a number of years.
And Senator Howe, would you like to address the amendment, or Senator Pratt? Senator Howe, are you with us?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm just trying to find a quiet place to do it at.
Okay.
So I believe this is the, and I don't have,
This is,
I couldn't quite hear what was going on. I believe this is the. Oh, yeah. The State Patrol, the pay study for the State Patrol.
correct, Senator Howe.
You know, we've got a package that we looked at in the security piece where we're putting together an additional 11 state troopers for Capitol Security. The concern is, unless we do something with the pay, we are still almost 40 state troopers short today. And the reason is because as the study has been done, they are number 34 out of the studied 35 agencies that they're comparable to. With that, we struggle to recruit state troopers, and without the ability to recruit state troopers, our security that we think we're going to do is actually reducing, because where are they going to get those new 11 officers from? So this is goes along with that package that's already in there of Senator Hoffman's, and because it is a complete package that we must do in order to make one piece of that work. We need this piece to continue to be able to recruit those state troopers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there any other discussion on the A87? Do we have a fiscal note on the A87?
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Nauman's coming, and I
Senator
believe,
Marty.
and I could be corrected, but that this may be in Senator Dibble's transportation bill. But I guess I'd like to hear more about this, and I don't know the status of it. I haven't heard from Senator Dibble or anyone, and would rather it stay in transportation if so, but.
Madam
Mr.
Chair and Senator Marty, this indeed was part of the transportation bill. It was also a governor's budget recommendation. I believe it was originally Senator Hoffman, Senate File 4273, and was amended. The fiscal note came back as 0, and that doesn't mean that there is no fiscal effect. In fact, there's about a $1.3 million benefit increase associated with this, but the existing appropriations are sufficient to cover that. There was some concern earlier in the legislative process that the study would carry a cost, but some changes that were made in I believe the Transportation Committee permitted the OLA to testify that those costs could be absorbed. So at this point, I do not think that the amendment as put in front of the committee has a trackable cost.
Senator Howe, do you know what the position is of the chair of the Transportation Committee?
I believe that he had it in the omnibus bill, but I'm not sure there is going to be an omnibus piece to that, so that's why we're trying to carry it separately.
Okay. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would just echo what Senator Howe said. I believe he was supportive. I asked Senator Dibble yesterday what the status of our transportation bill was. He said he was still unable to do anything with it. He was working on it, but did not give me any details of why the bill is not moving forward. I asked him several times, and he cannot answer why the bill is not moving forward.
Is Miss Byrd here? No, who is it? Oh, Mr. Watson is the fiscal staff. Okay. Would you just walk us through this bill, if you're familiar with it?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can walk through the amendment. So this amendment has, I would say, two different conceptual pieces that come from, that were heard by the Transportation Committee. Section 1 through, sections 1 through 6 all relate to changes to the provision covering death benefits for public safety officers that are killed in the line of duty. It would expand the categories of contributing factors that would be considered to be killed in the line of duty. And you can see that change at section 1. And sections 2, 3, and 4 are definitions that are, sections 2 and 3, are definitions that go along with that. Oh, and so, yeah. And then section 5 is a change to the definition of public safety officer to include certain part-time and paid-on-call positions. And then the other piece is the benefits and salary study changes that were being discussed earlier. You can see those at sections 7 and 8. Section 7 is a technical change, and section 8 would extend the study indefinitely to be conducted every odd number a year, but it would remove the benefits portion of the study. And then section 9 is a change that was added in the Transportation Committee that is unrelated to either provision, but allows State Patrol to recruit volunteer chaplains and provide for some incidental expenses along with their volunteering. And then section 10 is part of the change to the study. In law, it was going to sunset, and this removes that. And then section 11 is related to the change in the death benefit, providing for how the the death benefit is retroactive to 2020, and this provides for how retroactive claims can be made. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair,
Is that Senator Marty?
I know that Senator Dibble is still trying to work on his transportation bill, and this would be putting language into this bill, and I'm not sure, I think we should, if anything, maybe recess and see if we can reach out to Senator Dibble.
I have a text from him. I'm just trying to clarify it. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've gone through this a number of times where we've dual-tracked certain provisions, and that's all we're trying to do here is with the uncertainty of the transportation bill, just to make sure that this study and putting our state patrol troopers' welfare and help to recruit the additional state troopers that we need is really where we're going. It's just simply a dual tracking process for us, and if we get a transportation bill, we can take it out of this one. But I think it's important enough, because it wasn't included in the safety and security bill, because that was more focused on capital expenses. I think this is an appropriate way to do it.
Madam Chair, I just heard.
Yes, Senator Marty.
I just heard that staff had reached Senator Dibble, and he says it's fine to put it in here. So with that, go ahead.
All right. I forgot who offered the amendment. Senator Pratt? Senator Howe. Senator Howe. Any other discussion on the Howe A87 amendment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, then I think, Senator Marty, we're ready to move your bill.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This is a big package from a lot of supplemental appropriations. I think we're trying to address the most urgent needs in the state, and that's a tough balancing thing to do, but I think I appreciate the work of this committee over the past couple weeks and all of the committees that provided language for us in this, and I think it's a good bill and urge your support. And with that, I move that House File 2433 as amended be recommended pass and staff being instructed to make technical and conforming changes.
And final comment from Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Marty. We made this bill better today, but just as we talked about with the forecast bill, I think we've gone astray in being able to be transparent to the public and to live up to the single subject bill or provisions in our Constitution. As I said on the floor, I think we could have gotten 3 forecast bills done in less time than we did one big, massive forecast bill. And I think we're going to see the same thing, that we've got a bill here that does not match up with what the other body is doing. They are intending to pass out separate, as I understand it, they're intending to pass out separate supplemental bills for each agency, and to me, I think that's the appropriate way to do it. I have registered my concerns with Senator Marty both privately and publicly, and I understand his position. We disagree. We are still, this body is still affected by what happened in 2024. When we had a mass, and this is of nowhere the magnitude that bill was, but when we have these large, multi-subject omnibus bills, it erodes the trust of the public in their state government. And after 2024, I think we have to be extra concerned and cognizant of rebuilding that trust. And so, Madam President, I will be voting no against this bill. But I appreciate Senator Marty's work on this, and I appreciate the amendments that we were able to get on today, and in making this bill better.
Senator Marty, any comments before I renew your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Pratt. As I've tried, and I think the size of this bill is much smaller than some previous ones under both Democrats and Republicans for supplemental budget bills. And the single subject of this, we wanted to keep it as supplemental appropriations, which is an appropriate single subject, which is why we were trying to keep out the policy provisions, trying to keep out other things. And I've been working long prior to 2024, trying to make the legislature break up bills into smaller parts and so on. And as we go through this, we learn from things we could do better, and I would do things differently next time. We all try to do things and learn from how we do it, but I think this is a bill we can be proud of. I think we kept out a lot of the stuff, attempts to put in big policy provisions, and I do think a single subject is, in the case we spent so many hours about the other day, about forecast adjustment, period. That is a single subject. Supplemental appropriations is a single subject. And again, we do not want to have, I mean, I've seen 1,000-page bills with every kind of thing in them, and I oppose that, but I think this is an attempt to be strict on our single subject requirement and make it just supplemental appropriations, because this is a non-budget year. And with that, I ask for your support.
I just hope that when the staff makes technical corrections, that they change the title of the bill, and that's reflected when we take the bill up on the floor. I noticed that there were some problems yesterday on the floor. It's very confusing to members, and I think the public, if the title does not correctly represent what the bill is in front of us. Any other comments from members of the committee before we take our final vote? I just want to say thank you, Senator Marty, and thank you to the staff for this process. It was confusing at first, but I think we all adapted to it, and the goal is to have a clean supplemental finance bill. Senator Marty moves that House File 2433 as amended be recommended to pass, and staff be instructed to make technical and conforming changes, including the title of the bill. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay. Nay.
Motion prevails. The bill is passed, and its title agreed to.
Thank you for chairing, Madam Chair, and I'll come back we'll take Senator Hoffman's bill. I don't know if he's down here yet. If not, maybe we recess for 5 minutes. May Day meeting of the Senate Finance Committee will come back to order. We now are going to pick up Senate File 4476, Senator Hoffman's Omnibus Human Services Supplemental Appropriations Bill. And with that, we were discussing an amendment earlier. I think we finished that for now. But Senator Hoffman, I can't remember where you were on the bill, if you had other amendments you wanted to bring up now, or you want discussion, or you want to go back to.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. You're asking me, I have short-term memory loss. I love it. You're asking me yesterday. I don't even remember what it was 825. We were really talking about the 825. You remember, Senator Marty? And I think it's also important to note that the feds just decided to defer $91 million to the state of Minnesota. So when you look how the need for the 825 conversation really exists when you're talking now $300 and some million of feds saying no, and this is where it gets me. We're not talking about a withhold, Senator Marty. We're talking about a deferral. Withhold's a different animal, but on the deferral, it still causes the system to say, all right, now what are we doing? And so. And you and I know this, if unallotment always comes, the first unallotment always goes to the most vulnerable of the state of Minnesota. And I can guarantee you, like Tom Bach used to say, I'll guarantee you, John. But in this case, Senator Marty, that $300 and some million really is about $750 million, because when you add the state's investment into the services that go to our most vulnerable, which gets me to this point too. A deferral is different. If you withhold, now CMS has rules that say, you know, if it disrupts disability services, it's not okay. If it doesn't have in place continuity of care, it's not okay. So I think it's very important that we are having this discussion on the 825, and I appreciate what you and Mr. Nauman were talking about yesterday. So I do remember where we left off.
Okay. And on that, yes, I mean, that's a really important conversation, and I'm still wrestling with the ideas, but yes, I'm very troubled by the fact that some actions by the federal government, whether they're overturned in courts, eventually or something that really is devastating to the state of Minnesota and our taxpayers and our budget. And in terms of human services, what that means to people's lives.
Yes.
I very much worry about that. And again, I think part of the challenge is, I think what we as legislators have an obligation to do is do everything possible to push federal government not to do things like that. And I hope we prevent problems like that. But I'm not sure whether this, I feel a little bit uncomfortable about that amendment, which I was going to discuss at some on the last bill as well, where I think this is a discussion we should continue having in the weeks ahead, because I do not want us to be stuck where we have massive hits that cause unallotments or anything.
And I think the other thing, Mr. Chair, if I may, you talked about this being part of the integrity conversation, right? Which is, you know, I don't know where the other body, we're already meeting with the other body a lot. We have, and I also, Senator McQuaid, who's also here, and she's going to be coming and joining us too, because when I was not able to do the work of this committee, she was the one that was involved with all the conversations. So I appreciate her being here for our conversation later on as well. But I don't know, either way, Mr. Chair, the A25 that you and Mr. Nauman and we talked about and we've refined and done, it needs to be someplace. It really does. And I think it gets to the continuity care assurances, and it gets to the fact that you will not have disruption of people with disabilities. And that's really the fine marcation for me in the Centers for Medicaid Services. It's actually laid out in a rule. And so I guess it's up really to you where you think the A25 belongs, but it belongs someplace, and we will have that conversation even in conference committee. Does it fit in the integrity package conversation, or does it fit within our budget conversation? So with that, thoughts, Mr. Chair?
Thank you. And Senator Hoffman, did you have some amendments you are ready to present right now, or you want to take discussion?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe I have any other amendments. I think the big one was the 837, which we all did, and then we were just going to have the discussion on the 825 about whether it fits here or not. And that's all I have in my packet. I mean, you want me to go make up some amendments? I will, but
We always love it when you make up amendments, Senator Hoffman.
I could
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can help Senator Hoffman make up a quick amendment here. Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer the A40 amendment.
Senator Pratt offers the A40 amendment. A40 amendment is being distributed right now.
And this is the amendment. All right.
And perhaps, as it's being distributed, Senator Pratt can speak to it, and then staff can go through however you wish.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members, over the last several years, we've increased the costs to residents for these, for nursing homes and in particular. This bill imposes new criteria on staffing and staffing ratios that, already are hitting our nursing homes. As I recall, I think we're like 4,000 RNs short of what we need in the state, and this will just continue to put more pressure. You'll recall, Mr. Chair, that I recently hit my term limit, but I sat on the board of a local long-term care facility, and we were talking about paid family medical leave and the fact that we took care of our employees. We were part of Benedictine Health. Our nuns made sure that we treated our employees well, but we passed paid family medical leave, which was a hit to their cash flow, and we ended up having to raise rents. We added a surcharge a couple of years ago, and I think last year or 2 years ago, we increased that surcharge 110% on residents and a 115% increase to providers. So this, the increase raises $56.6 million in fiscal year 26-27 and $80.9 million in fiscal year 28-29. So a total of $137 million over the next 4 years. We increased the expense from $2,815 to $5,900 per licensed bed, effective in January of this year. And then we increased the surcharge for all facilities licensed as nursing home or nursing homes with boarding care from $8.86 to $19.02 per resident day. And this surcharge was nicknamed the granny tax. So we've increased the cost, and I had my dad in one of these facilities, and I watched those expenses go up. We are continuing to drain the resources of those seniors that need these services, and we're depleting their savings in such a way at a time when they've really spent their entire lives trying to save for this, and with the longevity of people now, more and more people need these services. So the 840 amendment would repeal the doubling of the granny tax that the legislature passed last year going forward, and it would change. It would cause our growing aging population. It's currently causing our aging population to spend more of themselves into poverty and putting further strain on their fixed incomes, and then potentially putting them on the waiver system. And then repealing the granny tax will allow more people to stay in nursing homes to receive the care they need and close to their families. Mr. Chair, we've talked a lot this session about affordability. This is not making, these provisions with the staffing ratios and the granny tax are not making this affordable for our seniors at this point in time, and we need to repeal it. Thank you.
Mr. Raymond, want to go through the financial things on the amendment?
That's what we just talked about, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, so for this proposal was enacted in the 2025 session. However, earlier this session, DHS let us know that they do not believe, due to changes in HR 1, that the surcharge would be able to be increased after October of 2026. So essentially, it would remain in effect from January 1, 2026 through the end of September of this year. So therefore, undoing this would have, we don't have a fiscal estimate on it, but I think based on last year's numbers would be roughly about a $10 million expense to the state. And it would be one time. And I will just note that the phase out in October of 2026 is reflected in the February 2026 forecast.
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Raymond. I was going to ask if Senator Pratt, did anybody present you with some of that fiscal information that Mr. Raymond just had, or what do you got there? Anything on that? If not, I get it.
You know, I'll take Mr. Raymond's. We had that just, so what we're doing is we're taking the 1902 back down to 886.
Yep.
And I think we were taking the, I think we took I think we had the surcharge back at 2815. Removed the increase effective January 2026, which would have had a $56 million, we had it as a $56 million impact to the biennium.
Mr. Raymond, I'm going to ask Mr. Raymond if that, thank you, Mr. Senator Pratt. Mr. Chair, can I get Mr. Raymond to look at his spreadsheet?
Mr. Chair, so that is correct in terms of what was booked last year. However, there were subsequent changes which were incorporated into the February forecast based on changes made in HR 1 last year that wouldn't allow this increase to go into effect beyond October 1st of 2026. So that was already, that the forecast assumes that goes away as of October 1st, 2026. So the $10 million figure I cited would be from when, roughly, from when this is enacted through the end of September. However, I'd have to get a fiscal estimate from the agency to get a number that we could book.
So Mr. Raymond, so in effect, we would be, this amount will go down after September 1st or September 30th?
Mr. Chair, it's October of 2026, so yeah,
October.
September 30th, the fiscal year on that. So that's based on what Mr. Raymond had said about the HR 1, so the department, which they already factored in the February forecast. But in this case, if we want to act earlier on that, we just need to know. That's what I asked Senator Pratt if he had any numbers there, but I think Mr. Raymond is pretty close. So we need to have an actual number, you know, in order to act on that, something, so.
So at this time, because we don't know what that number is, it's probably a $10 million cost, but we don't know for sure. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's, you know, what we can do, Mr. Chair, is since this is going away, we can eliminate it early. We can have fiscal staff put that into the spreadsheet that gets reported to the floor. And it meets all the criteria for Senate Rule 7.4.
Mr. Chair, does that put us, I don't know, does that put us out of bounds? Because there's also what Dr. Liskey had brought up, there's some actual fixes that we need to do within the family foster care stuff. He was correct. And so there were some concerns or some gaps. And so we have a fiscal, we're going to have a fiscal on the floor for that one too. So Dr. Liskey's going to be bringing something, Senator Liskey's going to be bringing something. He worked hard on this, and he sat with Christy and Elise yesterday. I just was blown away. This is how Human Services works, right? And so maybe you take a look at this fiscal impact that's there, because it's going to, that's the whatever Ms. Bailey finds, you know, with what Dr. Senator Liskey piece is, it's another 4 or 5 million, Eric. That's where we were thinking is, and we don't know, but we're going to have to make an adjustment to what you all say is okay for us going forward, and we'll do that on the floor. So can we maybe see what that fiscal notation is, and where it's got to come from someplace else within the spreadsheet, unless, Senator Marty, you want to give me an extra $10 million to.
Senator Hoffman, until we know how much it is, I'm going to encourage you not to accept the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you know, to Senator Hoffman, I mean, this is, we are constrained when this gets to the floor. And you even said on the offline conversation, we're gonna have to shift money in order to cover Senator Liskey's program. But we can't change a revenue source once it gets to the floor. We have to adopt it here in order for us to address it on the floor. I can't bring in a new revenue source. I can't bring in a new, a cut to a revenue stream that doesn't already exist in the bill. And so the only way we're going to be able to do this, the only way we're going to be able to really have an impact to our seniors, and I think, I was talking to Senator Johnson. He has a constituent that has been severely impacted by this. And like I say, the organization that I was part of has had to raise their rents, their cost to their residents as we've passed all these new mandates upon them. And there are new mandates in your bill that are going to increase the cost as well. So shouldn't we do something to reduce those costs as soon as possible?
Senator Hoffman, I think if you had, there are so many needs in terms of human services, and the $10 million cost, I would love to have this happen earlier, but I think when we look at what all is coming down at us and all the financial shortages we're facing, I'm very, very concerned about it, but
And the other
Chair
thing,
Hoffman.
the other thing that comes up, Mr. Chair, is the question is, did the nursing homes get the rate increase along with the surcharge? There's a lot of unknowns within this that I don't have an answer for. I don't. And the other thing that gets, the word is confused, is assisted living increases, right? That is not an entitled service like nursing homes, right? We have 11 Medicaid, 15, and actually, I used to know it off the top of my head, Eric. I was it's kind of like Public Law 94, 142. I could quote it like yesterday. But in this case, you got those mandated services we must, as a state, provide under Medicaid. That's a rule, right? There's an entitlement to that. Nursing homes is one of them. Assisted living is not. Then you start talking about the waivered services piece on that. So a lot of times, is that increase, so going back to my question on, did the nursing homes get the rate increase along with the surcharge? That's a question, that's not a statement. So that also needs to be added into that piece on it too. So I don't know if we can do it here, Senator Marty.
Senator Johnson on the A40 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Hoffman, for entertaining this. I think, going forward here, because we're so restricted on the floor, it would be pretty important to put this on now. We can make adjustments at the time when it comes to the floor. Take away is a lot easier than adding on there. But I'd just like to add a little bit finer point to the need of this. Senator Hoffman, you stated in your initial remarks regarding how we put the burden on the most fragile in our society. And this is one of those cases where the state has put the burden on the most fragile of our society. I just want to read quickly a text I got from what Senator Pratt had mentioned earlier. The administrator or a nursing home board member from my district texted me just yesterday. Good morning, Mark. I'm on the McIntosh Senior Nursing Home Board. We held a board meeting this morning, are attempting to determine how we, as other similar homes, are to deal with this 110% increase. Our rate will increase from $10,000 per month to over $25,000 per month. Now, this is a nursing home that's in proximity to Crookston Senior Living, which shut down. It also is right next to the Erskine Pioneer Home that recently shut down as well due to financial constraints, and these folks, along with others in my district, and I'm sure we have the same thing, are finding these impacts unbearable. And now our folks who are relying on having a nursing home close by or within even the region are having to travel to hour, 45 minutes away to find a place to go, maybe even further in a lot of cases. So this is another one where I think it's critical. It's something that we're serving our constituents, if we can save them and their nursing home that financial burden. This seems like a no-brainer going forward.
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, yeah, thank you, Mr. Senator Johnson, for bringing that. There's, at the same time we're having this discussion, I know that Rick Varco is talking with the Imperative on a one-time money that would also provide that fiscal relief to nursing homes. I mean, why do we, Senator Marty, why do we wait till February to have our second? We should have been coming in January and having these conversations. I just hate these short sessions because this is real impactful stuff. Because you got two different systems popping in here, and now you also have, so I don't know how that conversation is going, but that 10 million, if we put that 10 million to the conversations that Imperative's having with the Rick Varcos of the world, that is actual relief to those nursing homes as well. And I don't know where the figures are coming. We still need to have those figures. Again, I need to have those figures, Senator Marty. I'm with you two. I don't know if this is where to do it, because we have those two other pieces moving too. Senator Johnson, thoughts?
And
Mr. Chair?
Senator Johnson.
And so what I think we should do, because we don't know how everything is moving, we should put this into the package so that we don't eliminate it today. Going forward, I don't know how we get that back into the package again without adjusting some rules on the floor and making sure that we can make this happen. I think right now would be a good time to do it, and then we can make the adjustments going forward. You have my pledge to work with you on how, or Senator Pratt, on how to do that. But if we could, that would mean a great deal to our nursing homes.
Senator Hoffman, I'm going to encourage members not accept the amendment. I recognize this is something we'd like to do. I mean, we're just getting hammered at the federal level, just withholds everything else. Everything else, if we have the money to do this, I'd love to have us be able to do this, but I would encourage members not to accept the amendment at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me just say, I'd like a roll call on the granny tax amendment. And then just to let you know, this amendment does, there is interplay here with CMS because
We haven't approved it yet either.
those CMS rates have not been increased for the surcharge for MA beds because DHS didn't get the paperwork in time. So we like to blame the federal government, and it was on our own state agency that messed this up. Per our Senate rules, unless Mr. Nauman and Ms. Stengel have differently, if we don't put this in today, we lose our ability on the Senate floor to make these changes. And inserting this today allows us maximum flexibility for being able to then, because it puts it in the bill, you can remove it if that's what the Democrat majority wants to do. But we can't add it on the Senate floor unless we add it here today. And so if you're really serious, if you're sincere about trying to work on this between now and the floor and getting the right numbers, then I think we should put this in the bill today and be able to address it between now and whenever this comes up for a final vote.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Murphy.
I just want to say that I appreciate the argument you're making, but I'm also hearing Senator Hoffman talking about the willingness to work through this once we have more information on the impact. And so I think that I'm going to listen to Senator Hoffman.
And Mr. Chair, if I may just add to that, CMS is still, there's some technical questions that are still some holding this up. There's truths in that. There's truths that didn't get out, but there's also truths in the fact that there's some technical stuff. I can't control that. You guys can't control that. But we really can't go forward until we get the approval from a CMS on some things. And so, again, I go back to, I wish we'd not start in February and stuff like this. So.
Senator Pratt has requested a roll call on the A40 amendment. Staff will take
Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a quick question for Senator Murphy, if she would. Let's say this comes up. Let's say we work with Senator Hoffman between now and then. Will your caucus support suspending the rules so that we can take this up?
Senator Pratt, you could offer to pay for it in that bill. when it comes up, that's within the rules, I believe.
We do it all the time.
I'll ask Mr. Nauman.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair and members, you're asking me for an interpretation that is properly made by the Senate President on the Senate floor. Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, Senator Champion, the question is related to a rule that governs whether an amendment is in order or out of order on the Senate floor under Rule 7.4. And I'm loath to provide a strict interpretation because it's not my interpretation to make. What I think Senator Pratt is referencing, Senator Marty's referencing this, maybe even Senator Murphy as well, is one component of Rule 7.4, and not the exact point you were making, is reduce net revenue to a fund for a fiscal biennium without a corresponding reduction in net appropriations. So I think if that were done, because this proposes to reduce appropriation, and it were paid for, and then it could be in the context of what Senator Hoffman was referencing with respect to whatever Senator Liskey is talking about, and it were paid for, then I think the Senate President may read that as in order. What I think Senator Pratt was also referencing was the next clause, which says change appropriations, transfers, or revenues to an agency that was not in the bill as it was reported to the floor of the Senate. I think the question there becomes, would the Senate President read appropriations to be specific appropriations, transfers, or revenues have to be in the bill for them to be changed? Or is it the agency that matters? Obviously, the agency is littered throughout this particular bill, so I don't think that interpretation has a problem. But the question is, would a ruling under that clause be ruled out of order because this specific revenue change was not in the bill?
Mr. Chair?
Senator Champion.
And if I might add, the president might say at that particular time and give a lot of deference to the first prong of that, which is, does it lower or change, and is there a corresponding notion that would help this go forward, like money? Like if you're bloating and increasing and you're not taking anything away, then you are in violation of the rule on the floor. But if there's a corresponding, we are increasing, but we're taking something away, and it's budget neutral, then it would make, then it would have a better shot of, being revealed. And I'm certain what the president also does, he always consults with the financial people who help him or her to understand the financial picture and that financial element in the rule.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Chair, the intent of doing this today is to have the ability not to have to offset those changes. As we've heard today, my numbers were even a little high, right? We're talking a cost of $10 million that has a real net impact on the on senior citizens who have worked hard their entire lives, who want to live out the remaining years in dignity, who are on fixed incomes, and we're pushing them into poverty more quickly. And we're saying that $10 million in a $70 billion budget is going to bankrupt us. That we can't do that for the very most vulnerable in our society. This granny tax increase should have never been passed in the first place. And to say that we have to then go offset it on the Senate floor when we can do it right here today without having to do that offset for, and I hate to say it because so many in the public, I know it's a lot of money, but for a mere $10 million, when you look at a $70 billion budget, I think is more than, I just don't understand the argument, Mr. Chair. We just spent in the last bill, we just spent net general fund, $11 million. Didn't blink an eye. And we ended up, when you look at all the bills, expenditures and transfers, we spent over 21 million. We just did a $1.8 billion forecast adjustment. And we can't find $10 million for our seniors for the next 6 months and help them save a little bit of money in their bank accounts. This is real money to them. It may not be real money to us because we're talking in the billions, but this is real money to them.
They'll have to do another CMS.
And I just am appalled by the conversation that we're having here today. So if you're ready to take it to a roll call, let's take it to a roll call. And anybody, and you guys can vote to keep the increase to the granny tax.
Senator Pratt, before we take the roll call, just to comment that, yeah, if 10 million is that easy to come by, I just keep thinking the SNAP program folks who are being hurt by all the cuts, everybody else, and there's so many people in this state who are being hurt, including an awful lot of senior citizens struggling to make ends meet, and we keep cutting things there and we take it away and so on. So yes, we could put the 10 million in here, we can put it in somewhere else, and I understand your point. And
Well, Mr. Chair, we increased the cost to our seniors when we implemented Earn Sick and Save Time. We increased the cost when we implemented paid family medical leave. I've talked on several occasions in this very committee about how our employers were working with their employees to make sure that they had the time off that they needed, and now we've taken it out of their cash flow, and so they had to increase rents. Now we have staffing mandates that are going to increase the cost to our nursing homes, and we've done nothing to reduce the cost to those very residents, and this is what this intends to do.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you for this conversation. I don't, and Senator Pratt, do you know if the nursing facilities have had the surcharge or associated rate increases prior to? CMS has not approved it yet. Do you know if they've already had that happen to them, or are these like we do the projection of, or is this a projected forecast? If you need to phone a friend, you can. But I don't think, Senator Pratt, that the nursing facilities have had a surcharge or associated rate increase because CMS hasn't approved what we did last year. And that was given to CMS January 9th, January 1st of this year. And they've yet to respond to that. And so if we were to change something again, they would have to go back, and we could retroactively do that January 1. But so do you know if any of those? I mean, it's an honest question, I guess, is that because the answer should be no.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, from what I understand, the providers are saying no to that, and that the private pay has had to abide by the increase.
The roll call has been requested. Staff will take the roll.
Senator Marty.
Chair votes no.
Senator Friends.
No.
Senator Pratt.
Yes.
Senator Champion.
No.
Senator Draheim. Senator Howe.
Yes.
Senator Jasinski.
Aye.
Senator Johnson.
Aye.
Senator Mohammed.
No.
Senator Murphy.
No.
Senator Pappas.
No.
Senator Wiklund.
No.
Senator Draheim.
Yes. Did you get that?
Yes, Senator Draheim.
Now we did. There being 5 ayes and 7 nays, the motion does not prevail. Further amendments? Further discussion? If not, Senator Hoffman, you want to speak to the bill?
Mr. Chair, members, thank you. This is, we get to the why we do what we do in human services, and this conversation is what it's about. It's about real people. And so I appreciate the conversations the last few days with you guys, and I hope we can stay focused on the why we do what we do, and I appreciate your leadership in this, Senator Marty. So with that, please approve this and let us keep continuing going on to say yes. So thank you.
With that, Senator Murphy moves that Senate File 4476 as amended be recommended pass. Staff be instructed to make technical and conforming changes. Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
No.
Motion still prevails.
Thank you, Mr.
With
Chair.
that, Senator Hoffman, thank you very much. And I'm going to suggest, because we've been meeting all morning, that maybe we take a brief recess for 20 minutes for people to have lunch or something, 30 minutes. Senator Wiklund, how long is your bill going to take?
Mr. Chair,
Senator Pratt.
I think if people can hang with us, we can probably power through this one fairly quickly.
Senator Wiklund, you can be up if you're ready for it. Senate File 3298, Senator Wiklund. And I'm told that Senator Wiklund believes it'll be less than 4 hours, right? We are getting the bills distributed to members.
You know, I think, well, why don't I just have it in case there's something.
Senator Wiklund, we'll start with the presentation of the bill and consideration, any amendments and so on. And then this would pass to the floor as a standalone health professional scope and licensing bill. And with that, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for hearing Senate File 3298. This is the Health and Human Services Health-Related Occupations Licensing Bill. The last couple years we've tried to have a collection of bills that are related, and they are all related to health-related occupations. This bill this year combines 10 different bills that we heard in the HHS committee this session. And this bill does several different types of things. It establishes professional licensure, registration, and modifies professional practice requirements. And just at a high level, there aren't that many articles in it, and there is an index, so you can see the articles are single topic articles, and you can see where the bill came from that is included in this bill. But at a high level, the bill establishes a licensure for music therapy. It establishes registration for massage therapy and Asian bodywork therapy. And then for other areas, it adds or amends Minnesota statutes that relate to the following health-related professional practice areas: the acupuncture and herbal medicine practice, the athletic trainer practice, massage therapy and Asian bodywork therapy, mortuary science, music therapy, physician assistant practice, social worker practice, dentistry practice, marriage and family therapy practice, and pharmacy practice. And so I won't go through all the different topics in the bill. I do have an A9 amendment that is, well, it's mostly technical, and it does bring in some additional provisions that we were able to negotiate with the parties involved and want to include in the omnibus. and I could have Ms. Heichel go through the author's amendment. If you'd like.
Senator Wiklund offers the A9 author's amendment. Is there a discussion on that amendment? If no, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails.
And, Mr. Chair, I would just will make one comment about the author's amendment, then just to say that it does, or did you want to have council walk through it, or do you want me to just highlight?
Ms. Heichel, do committee members want to walk through of the bill, or are they aware of which provisions they're interested in discussing?
Mr. Chair.
Nobody's begging for it. I guess we can say for the effort.
I'll just give a highlight of one
Please do.
thing that we included that wasn't in the original bill. We heard a bill related to physical therapy, and the committee and I had concerns about some of the provisions that were in that bill. And so we did not include it in the omnibus as it passed out of the committee. But since then, some of the parties have been working together, those who had concerns and those who wished to see provisions brought forward. And so the language that is included in the author's amendment does a few things. It modernizes some outdated terminology by aligning statute with education, licensure, and team-based practice standards. And this relates to supervision of physical therapist assistants and students by physical therapists. It does not change scope, roles, or supervision roles, or the number of physical therapist assistants or students that physical therapists can supervise. And it strengthens the definition of supervision to reinforce that physical therapists must be actively involved in care decisions. It also aligns statutory language with terms that the profession has defined by changing the words on-site to direct. And so I just want to be clear that those are the more substantive additions to the bill, and I want to make sure everybody knows that that was done in this amendment. But with that, I'm open to
Discussion on
other
the bill
questions.
overall. Let's begin that. Or other amendments from committee members? Senator Pappas, did you have one you said?
Yes, I do have an amendment, Mr. Chairman, the A8 amendment.
Senator Pappas has the A8 amendment, which is not in the packet, so it's being distributed.
Mr. Chairman, while that's being passed out, I just want to tell Senator Wiklund that I really appreciate all her work she's done on the scope bill. I think doing these bills frequently is really important so that we are providing, registration or whatever is necessary for health-related occupations. We just know that doctors can't do it all. And in fact, funny story, I just found out that podiatrists will no longer cut nails for elderly people. And so you have to find a nurse who maybe specializes in cutting nails that is willing to do it. And I do actually agree that in the health field, people should be working at the top of their license because we have had doctor shortages, especially in rural Minnesota. So, Mr. Chairman, and one additional thing, Senator Wiklund, even though we may not agree on this one issue, I do want you to know that I really respect all the work that you've done and how hard you work on healthcare issues. This amendment would repeal the transition to practice requirement for nurse practitioners and certified nurse specialists. It's the language from Senator Kupik, Senate File 1794, and the companion to that bill passed the other body with overwhelming support on Monday with only 12 voting against. APRNs, Advanced Practice Registered Nurses in Minnesota, have had full practice authority, but NPs, nurse practitioners, and CNSs, after they become a registered nurse and after they go back to school to complete their advanced degrees and their clinicals and their certification, must then work for 2,080 hours in a setting that also employs a doctor. This requirement was put into the statute as a compromise in order to allow advanced practice registered nurses full practice authority back in 2014. Since gaining full practice authority, APRNs have been able to serve patients better in all kinds of settings, and the NPs and CNSs lead clinics and private practices all over the state, especially in primary care and mental health care. And there were a number of stories that were submitted in our packets, but this particular requirement prevents those clinics from hiring new graduates and leads many that want to work in Greater Minnesota or other APRN-led clinics to end up in large health systems instead, or even leave the state for those without these requirements, like North Dakota and Iowa. And so we're not really getting the benefit of their skills and their training. The APRN's education prepares them to practice. So, well, I think there may have been a time in the past, we've been trying to have these discussions, the advocates, with the Minnesota Medical Association, for example, and it's been very difficult to have discussions. And I know Senator Kupik said he's had this bill for 2 years and has been trying to have discussions. So I think it's just time that we just kind of move ahead, and I would appreciate your support on the A8 amendment.
Senator Wiklund, discussion on the A8 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I am in opposition to this amendment. I guess my process for bringing bills forward in the committee has been to do evaluation before session. I talk with bill authors, with stakeholders. I review the language. I review the questionnaires that are submitted as part of this process. And I try to assess what I think are the most viable proposals and the ones that seem to me that have resolved major issues that I think are, that some of them have. We did not hear every single bill that related to a health-related profession this session, and I haven't done so in past years when I've been chair. And this was one that I felt, based on my research and discussions with committee members before session, I did not feel comfortable hearing the bill. And I feel like this proposal, it takes away a whole requirement for some transition time and collaboration, and it doesn't really address, that people might need that before they are able to fully practice independently. We did, and that was during my tenure here, but it was when I was very new in my career, and I know the discussion in 2014 was very involved. There was a lot of negotiation between the parties to try and get to the having the ability for APRNs to have the right to practice independently. And so I'm uncomfortable in removing this requirement for a transition period to practice. If there are issues with not being able to get a physician to work with, I think we should talk about, well, why is that, or what are some alternatives to that? I have talked with my colleagues who actually work in healthcare, and also looked at research that they've done, and I think that this is not a way to make sure that patients are protected and that we're getting the best training outcomes for people going into the field. If we want to address the rural areas and primary care, I think there's other discussions we could have, and in fact, I know that maybe we aren't feeling comfortable that the MMA and the APRN groups have had enough discussions, but I do know that they have been discussing this very recently, and that they did, the MMA has come forward with some additional language to examine. And so I'm opposed to adding this amendment today. I'm not opposed to having more discussion to see if that compromise language would be suitable. And then, this is something that could be added or could be discussed on the floor, so.
Mr. Chairman, I think part of the problem is this has been in the books now for 12 years, and I think the APRNs have really proved their value, and that it's really more appropriate for nurses to be training nurses to do the work that they do. It's not really, it doesn't seem to me really appropriate for doctors to be training nurses. They do have a whole different practice. And it's very expensive to have this collaborative practice. It can be up to $10,000 per APRN for, for kind of minimal really oversight or maybe not even any oversight of nurses. So, and some of these clinics are being actually driven out of business because of the high cost of having to be in this collaborative relationship. I think that since Senator Kupik told me he's had this bill for a number of years, there was plenty of time for it to be heard in committee. There seems to be some barrier there. I'm not quite sure what it is, but obviously there's a lot of support for this given what happened in the other body. And it was my knowledge, I talked to some of the APRN advocates last night about 9:30, and they had a meeting with the Hospital Association at 7. It seems a little late to be coming to the table after it's already passed the House and is being heard the next morning. And I have not been provided with any language this morning, any compromise language that's been asked for repeatedly and not provided. So I think that it's a pretty frustrating situation, Senator Wiklund. And, when you're really trying to provide quality health care, especially in rural Minnesota, underserved communities, and you have a large, important entity in the state that's kind of blocking that. So, I would like the support from the committee and would appreciate that some more support today. If it doesn't happen, it's going to come back on the floor, and I think it'd be better to have this discussion here in committee and do it rather than to have, long conversations on the floor.
Mr. Chair.
Further discussion.
Senator
Mr.
Pratt.
Chair,
Wiklund.
Senator Pratt.
Can I?
Senator Pratt, I'm sorry, I didn't see where hands are. Senator Wiklund, then Senator Pratt.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'd just like to highlight that I try to work on these professional, where there's a lack of agreement. I think you can look at the past few years where we have had discussions, lengthy discussions about optometry and ophthalmology. They do not neatly fit into the, committee discussion time, and it has taken a lot of time outside of that. Last year we did get to the point of passing compromise language in that optometry and practice. So I just think that what I'm looking for is an outcome that is beneficial for patients and healthcare across Minnesota. I think that we can get at that by, encouraging the discussion, a serious discussion before we just decide that it's been long enough. I would also like to say that I'm hearing that the Board of Nursing is not supportive of this proposal.
Senator Pratt, then Senator Murphy.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to request a roll call.
Okay. Senator Murphy.
Mr. Chairman, about the Board of Nursing, I just would like to clarify that, if that's the case. And if we need that clarified, we do have Carrie Johnson with the APRN president could probably respond to that. But if Senator Murphy wants to go ahead, I'm fine with that.
We can have her come up. Welcome to the committee.
Hello, committee. I am Carrie Johnson. I'm a family nurse practitioner and the DNP program director at Metro State University. I'm also the APRN coalition president, and we have not heard anything from the Board of Nursing opposing this. The last we had heard from them and met with them, they were on board with this.
Senator Murphy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Outside of my tenure in the legislature, I've spent more than a decade teaching in the DNP program, the Doctor of Nursing Practice program at St. Kate's University, where I worked with advanced practice nurses who are pursuing their doctoral degree. And like many of the healthcare professions, the DNP, the Doctorate in Nursing Practice, is a terminal degree in nursing and a recognition of the professional role for advanced practice nurses and their role, their critical role in the healthcare delivery system. I was in the legislature when Senator Sharon, also a registered nurse, skillfully moved the advanced practice registered nursing proposal that became law in 2014. We were one of the first states, and there was a reluctant agreement to include this supervisory language. It was a compromise at the time. And why it is challenging from my perspective is the discipline of nursing and the discipline of medicine are different. They are separate and different professions and separate and different disciplines. And if there are concerns about the need for licensed registered nurses who become advanced practice registered nurses, so building upon their clinical practice, if there are concerns about the skill level necessary, that supervisory responsibility should come from more experienced advanced practice registered nurses. I have tremendous faith in Senator Wiklund and her incredibly thorough process. In these last number of years, as scope of practice proposals have come through the legislature, she has been spot on in making sure that we are clear about what is coming before us, and also making sure things that are not ready yet or don't have, from her judgment and her perspective, the right level of support, that they don't move forward. And those are some of the hardest policy decisions that we face. So I find myself in the position of wanting to support the amendment and wanting to support our chair. And I hope if those who are not engaging with the advanced practice nurses to reach a suitable compromise are listening, I hope that you will continue to do the work necessary to make sure that the APRNs are able to practice to the top of their license. And if we're concerned about supervisory responsibilities as an already experienced registered nurse enters into practice as an advanced practice registered nurse, that supervision comes through the profession of nursing. And with that, I'll say thank you to Senator Wiklund for the work that you're doing on this proposal.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, out of respect for the chair and for the majority leader, I will withdraw the amendment. But members, I'm sure Senator Kupik will bring this back on the floor, and I'm sure it will pass on the full floor. So I think that if anyone has concerns about this amendment, then they better get to work and find some acceptable language. Thank you. I'll withdraw the amendment.
Thank you. Senator Pappas withdraws the amendment. And I want to comment briefly because I think Senator Murphy expressed my feelings very well, too. I have extreme respect for the chair, and I think you do an incredible job of dealing with the licensure things, which frankly very few other legislators want to take on because it's so contentious and so difficult. And I also am troubled the fact that so much of the opposition from this is from an important medical profession, the medical association, but I also think that who should be supervising and making sure the training is adequate is others who are in the same profession, not related professions. So anyhow, I am struggling with this one as well, and I appreciate the withdrawal of the amendment now, but I do hope that negotiations and discussion can continue in the next week or so. And again, I can't say enough how we respecting the process that you put together, because I think we've always had, somebody who can lobby harder for something gets it, but you've made it very good that way. But again, I'm just troubled by the fact it's different profession related, strongly related, that works together with them, who is saying this isn't appropriate, and I think we should, if we don't feel the licensure and everything else is the right level, we should look at that too. But with that, this amendment has been withdrawn, and I will ask if there are other amendments to the bill or further discussion of the bill. If not, Senator Wiklund moves that Senate File 3298 as amended be recommended to pass, and staff be instructed to make necessary technical and other changes. Senator Wiklund, on the bill, other comments?
No, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the discussion today, and I just want to acknowledge that I think there has been discussion by medical professionals, and I think that the concerns that are being raised about removing a training requirement or a transition requirement stem from the fact that they are working together with the nurse practitioners closely in some environments, and the concern comes from that. So this isn't like, I just want to make sure it's not seen as like arbitrary, having to do with professions. It's born out of experiences that they have the concerns. And I will work to get more discussion, make sure more discussion happens, and make sure that I get clarification from the Board of Nursing on their position as well. So, thank you.
And Senator Wiklund, just to be clear, I don't mean to be saying medical doctors shouldn't be involved in these discussions. I just know too many times we have, as you know, in dealing with all these licensure things, there's a fencing. We want to have this around us in our profession. We don't want anyone else to be doing similar things. And there's also the need to protect the public interest, and you're trying to balance that well. And I appreciate this bill. I think there's incredible amount of work in this, and I think a lot of our professions will greatly appreciate what's in here. With that, is there further discussion on Senate File 3298? If not, Senator Wiklund renews her motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion prevails. And Senator Wiklund, you did take less than 4 hours on your bill.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we are about to adjourn. We've completed our agenda for today. Next week, I believe calendar holds have been set out for Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But it looks like scheduling for Monday is not going to work, so expect a hearing Wednesday or Thursday, likely one on Friday next week. Some of the bills that remain are outdoor heritage, the claims bill, program integrity package, workers' council recommendations, and we hope to complete our work next week because we are running out of days. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand you correctly, we can cancel that hearing for Monday. Thank you.
Correct. Is there further discussion? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.